narrative and noticing.
Right.
Narrative, in a certain sense, often precedes you. Noticing is what you do in the experience itself. Now, the question is, the narrative, where does it come from? How did it come about? But the key is to notice.
Right.
It's a skill, it's an art, and I'm going to make the claim that that's the skill of a chassid.
Welcome to Homesick for Lubavitch, a podcast where we explore Lubavitch identity in the year 2024. My name is Ben Siafson, and I will be your host. Let's begin. Alrighty, I'm here with Rabbi Peretz from Brandeis University, or is it college?
University.
Less pretentious. I like it already. Just so you know, you're in a very pretentious neighborhood of Philadelphia. Our streets are named after Ivy League colleges. You're in Dartmouth, and down the road is Harvard, and whatever. Maybe I don't know if Brandeis has made it.
No, very far from it.
but
it's a wannabe.
I just want to make you feel. I guess I didn't make you feel welcome. I did the opposite of what I thought I'd do. Anyway, thank you for coming here, for being here. Pleasure to meet you, and. Yeah, I mean, I'd like to introduce you a little bit, but I would like you to tell most of your story.
Okay.
I know you as a shliach on Brandeis University. I think the first time and last time I bumped into you was probably 15 years ago. I was invited to your wife's home in Crown Heights by your brother-in-law, Eli.
Okay, yes.
Yes, I know Eli. Aryeh was my roommate, I think, for a year in Yeshiva. Anyway, Eli invited me for Friday night, and that's where I think I first met you at the Shabbos table. And that's about all I know about you.
Well, apparently I didn't make any impression negatively or positively, which is what I like. I'm glad.
You seem like a nice guy.
Great.
But beyond that was it. I do remember your wife telling your boys who were getting after it, they were fighting with each other. She said, "Don't hit each other's heads. Like fight, but just just no heads." I thought that was clever and interesting.
Yeah. Okay.
But that's about it. Anyway, so I'm very happy to have you on the podcast, and I know there's some things that we'd like to get to. Some podcasts are more free-flowing, and just let's see where it goes. There is something specific that you're involved in with your wife that we'd like to get to down the road, but I think we should first start with who you are and
Sure.
what your story is.
Well, it's all related.
Maybe move the microphone like a couple inches away from you. Yeah, there you go.
Chanie and I got married in 2000, Tafshin Samach. And we moved out on shluchos to Brandeis in 2001. At the time, the opportunity to go to shluchos on Brandeis was floating around Lubavitch for quite a couple of months, if not a year. Nobody was really interested in it.
Why not?
Because two reasons. The Chabad model, the Chabad business model, at least back then, was one where you go to a community, you establish yourself as a presence in the community, and the community supports you.
Right.
Okay. That model is not viable on a college campus with students.
Right.
So that's one. So college campus wasn't an interesting, viable option, a viable model. And secondly, you also come to a community and you want to have your competitive advantage, what makes you different, right? You're bringing something different to the place. Brandeis has and had a very vibrant Jewish life.
Right. It's a Jewish college.
It's a college with a large Jewish community, supported by the Jewish community. So it's ostensibly a Jewish college. It's called that way. So, like, what are you gonna bring there?
Right.
So, although at that time, and I believe that was the first time that George Rohr the Rohr family was giving money for a campus organized by Rebbe Zarchi at Harvard. He wasn't really interested. It was floating around, anybody interested, and it came to our attention, and we were a young couple. wanting to go on shluchus, start our own. And we were interviewing for different opportunities, and this came to our attention. We said, we're going for it. So we went for it.
Well, let's back up a little bit. Let's
Okay.
back up. So you said you got married in 2000.
Mm-hmm.
I don't mean to date you, but that probably means you were born in the late 70s.
I was born in Lamed Vav, 75.
Right, so you're a little over 10 years older than me. So we'll get back to getting married and going on shluchus. I know that's very relevant to the idea that we're going to get to. But let's talk about growing up in Crown Heights in the 80s and 90s.
Sure. So I was actually born in Israel. My parents came to Israel from Russia in the early 70s. They were part of the underground Chabad community in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
My grandfather would have it was a kvius for him to have the Yushvat Farbrengen in Moscow was in his house. And even though they left a few days before they left Russia, they still had the Farbrengen in his house.
What year did they leave Russia?
71.
So a few years before you were born.
Yeah, and my parents were married in Eretz Yisrael, and then I was born.
Oh, so your father, as a bacher, had in his parents.
No, my mother. I'm sorry, I wasn't correct. I think my mother's side, my mother's family,
is from Russia.
both of them,
Both from Russia.
both of them from Russia. And the Farbrengens were my grandfather, Zolzang Stark, on my mother's side.
What's his name?
Chatzernov.
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 And he lives in Eretz Yisrael now.
Yeah. So my parents got married. I was born. My sister was born, and then they moved to Crown Heights in the late 70s.
There isn't a more Geshe name than Peretz Chein.
It's a brand.
Yes, it's a brand. I mean, this goes all the way back to the Alter Rebbe, right?
Yeah.
Why did the Cheins get stuck in Russia? Why didn't they come out with everybody else?
So some part of my family did. My father's grandmother, Baba Shifra, came out in 47 with her daughter and her husband.
Your father's mother, you said?
My father's grandmother.
Grandmother.
My father's father and his family stayed behind for whatever reason. It's still uncertain. They weren't
Russian.
ready to
We
go.
don't talk about it.
They weren't ready to go. I don't know. They don't talk exactly. I think that's more accurate. They don't talk about it. But they stayed behind. And remember, not everybody could go.
Right.
It ended. The trains ended at a certain point in time.
Right.
So maybe they were going to go later, and
Right.
it all ended. So
Right. No, it's such a fascinating part of Lubavitch history. It almost like it's like that kind of cul-de-sac that in a way gets forgotten about, because the Lubavitch narrative is we were in Russia, then we came to America, and the Rebbeim came to America, then we all came a few years later, and that's where Lubavitch was. But there's this whole like chapter of Lubavitch proper, not just like refuseniks that knew about Lubavitch, but like Lubavitch proper. The book of Samarkand by Zaltzman.
So Zaltzman tells the story as it was in Samarkand. There's a whole other story nobody has really told yet, though he references it somewhat in his book, in Moscow,
right,
and in Malachovka, which is a town outside of Moscow, where there was a Chabad, a little Chabad community. My grandparents were there, others were there.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
So they were there after the war, according to what you're saying, a good 25, 30 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So my grandfather, who I'm named after, Peretz, he never left Russia. He passed away
in Russia.
In Russia, yeah.
Before they made it out.
Yes.
He passed away at the hands of the government?
No, he passed away from stomach cancer.
Stomach cancer.
He spent a period of time in Siberia, in a Siberian labor camp.
Yeah.
And there he developed an illness that took him.
Yeah.
And I was born a few months, I think 6 months afterwards.
Wow. Crazy.
So move fast forward.
Yes, sir.
We came to the United States, and I grew up in Crown Heights from the late 70s, late Lamets.
Right. So you grew up in Crown Heights as far as you remember.
Yeah, until 91. Then I went to Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael at 14, and so I spent in Yeshiva there. Yeah, I was a kid.
So you grew up in Crown Heights. Then you moved to when you went to Eretz Yisrael. That was which year?
Nun Aleph.
So you went to Eretz Yisrael before the stroke.
Yeah, I was in Eretz Yisrael when the stroke happened.
Was there a reason why you left Crown Heights at the time?
Yeah, I was just bumming around. I was wasting time in school, and I just wanted something different.
I always find that so fascinating. I'll be honest with you. Not because like I found a bum from those days. It's more, again, it's the narrative thing where like the narrative is that everyone wanted to be in Crown Heights and everybody was dying to be in Crown Heights because everybody wanted to be by the Rebbe. That's the narrative. Not only that, everybody today wants to be in Crown Heights of those days. Ask a bacher.
Mm-hmm.
If you could be back in Tafshin Nun Aleph in Crown Heights,
Mm-hmm.
would you go back? And the answer would be 100% yes.
Currently,
Well,
in
yeah,
the current perspective.
of course,
Yeah.
of course, but that's a narrative,
Right.
right? And I think that's such a it's always fascinating. Not that what you're saying therefore means that everyone else is faking it or that it's not true, but it's a narrative is exactly that. It's like what it was for most people superimposed on everybody.
Right.
And I think it's always important to refine the narrative and realize, one second, this isn't necessarily true for everyone, right?
Yes. You use a good word. Narratives are superimposed.
Okay.
And the narratives we live in and the narratives are given to us and the narratives we make up. It's a whole parsha unto itself. We could get to that later.
Okay.
But it's a big deal that needs to be addressed.
Right, but okay, I understand. So you said as an issue you want to talk about it later, but as it pertains to your story, I think it's like paint the picture a little bit what it means for a 14-year-old bacher to decide that I would rather go to Eretz Yisrael, which I'm guessing from what I've heard about Israeli yeshivas today, I'm guessing it was not a luxury hotel that you were going to.
I was the only American kid in that school.
Right.
It was a culture shock.
Where? In
Lud.
Lud.
It was
What makes a Crown Heights kid at the height of the nuns, this is like the height of it, decide to go to Lud? I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, I was, like I said, I was bumming around,
Right.
just wasting time. I was just tired of it. And I said, okay, I want to take my life seriously. Strange as it may sound for a 14-year-old.
But did you not pick up on this avirah that everyone talks about in Crown Heights? I'm not asking you to talk for anybody else.
I speak for myself. At the time, listen, until my when I was 12 or 11, 12, until my bar mitzvah, every Shabbos I was by the Rebbe's, right by Brandeis, sitting by the Rebbe's feet. I think it was just for my last year, like when I was 12 until my bar mitzvah. Sure. So you had those moments, but you also had what was actually going on in my own personal life, what I was experiencing in school for the most part.
The rest of the week,
it was just crappy in the sense that it was just nothing. It felt a waste.
It felt a waste because the learning wasn't being taken seriously.
Yeah, I just felt that way. I always felt that it was empty.
It was empty.
It was empty. I wanted something more.
Wow.
And I came to Eretz Yisrael. So I came to Eretz Yisrael. I didn't apply to Yeshiva. So I had family there.
Right. No, you had a reason to go to Israel.
So
I understand.
I went into one yeshiva.
Where did your family live in
Yerushalayim.
In Yerushalayim. The Chein still live in Yerushalayim?
It's my mother's family.
Oh, you said
My mother's family. My father's family is in Crown Heights, in New York. So I came to the first yeshiva, apply. I came with my uncle. He took me to the first yeshiva. I just landed, went to yeshiva. He called up in advance, made an appointment with the Rosh Yeshiva, fired me, and I knew I was awful. He said, "I'm sorry, this guy's not qualified." I'm sorry.
Send them back to Crown Heights.
He's not qualified. Okay, so we tried. This was Rishon. Then we went to Lud, called up there, said, could you take him in? I said, all right, come, let's get a faher. I kind of got a faher. And he was fahering me on the Gemara that I actually thought I knew. Actually thought I learned. And he's fahering me, and I also...
Who's he?
Velvel Segel, Rosh
Okay.
Yeshiva.
Yeah.
I didn't know, I know crap. And he said, I'm sorry, you're just not qualified. You're a sweet kid, but you're just not qualified. I was not qualified. I couldn't make a landing on a Blat Gemara, let alone listen to a shir fully in Hebrew.
But you wanted to at this point.
Yeah, that's what I was there.
Right.
So my uncle pleaded my case and said, he's here.
Yeah.
Give him a chance. So he said, okay, I'll give you 2 months chance. Put me in a class lower than my grade, lower than my age, like the entry, like the first year instead of the second year, which was my age.
Right.
And there, poof. Now, I was a kid that loved sports.
Right.
You can't touch a ball there.
Certainly not in those days.
Certainly not in those days. And I was the only American kid in the school. There were some others who had American parents who I befriended. And just started working, started hustling, started working, started learning, and just exposed to a new appreciation for learning, for Gemara, for Mefarshim, for Chassidus. Like, wow, this stuff is really interesting. And interesting. Now, before that, I wasn't interested in shlichus as a kid. I was going to become a lawyer and make a lot of money. That was like my childhood fantasy. And while I was in Yeshiva, they had skashas to the Rebbe and learning Chassidus, and I had a shift in my mind, and I said, you know what, I think I want to go on shluchas. That's what I want to do.
This is all happening before the stroke.
Yeah. This is all happening before the stroke, and over the course of the year, or the second year, I started sharing this with my family. And I remember I had one great aunt, stark, from a Chabad family, but already more, came to Israel, became more, not part of the Chabad community. I was sharing with her, and she was like getting into me on it and said, "You're making a mistake."
Really?
Yeah. How are you going to support yourself? What are you doing?
Okay. And she has a point.
She has a point, but I argued back and forth, and then I had a conversation with another family member who says, "Well, this is what you think about it now.
Right.
When you get older, let's have a conversation."
Right. They also have a point.
They have a point. And a few years later, I had a conversation with her. We met somewhere, and I said, "Remember that conversation we had, and you said, reconsider it. You may reconsider it. I still haven't reconsidered it." So, so that was my yeshiva experience for the most part.
How was Crown Heights? I find it fascinating. Obviously, I'm kind of harping on an anecdote here, and I want to be clear. I'm not trying to say that you reflect on anything more than yourself. I mean, I certainly don't have evidence to claim that, but it's still fascinating as an anecdote. So very unexpected to me. How did going back to Crown Heights now feel? Like what changed for you now that you come back? I'm sure you came back to Crown Heights. You came back to Crown Heights at all?
When?
Once you came to Israel, you came back for Yom Tov to your family?
Yeah.
What changed about Crown Heights? What changed about the Rebbe's chutzner to you now that you had gone away?
Oh, so when I came back, I had a far greater appreciation for it, far greater understanding of it, far greater connection to the Rebbe's Maimarim, the Rebbe's Sichos, being there, as much as I can, whenever I can, back in Aleph and in Beis. The distance that I had and learning the Maimarim and the Sichos back then, from a distance, offered a deeper appreciation and understanding of what it is, particularly being with people in the Israeli Bachrim, who for them it was all distanced.
Right. No, to me this is a very important topic. The question of distance or the question of closeness. And this is not just about Lubavitch and Crown Heights. In a way, it starts with Tenchet Tmimim, where the Rebbe Rashab basically says, "I'm going to have the Bachram right here by me, under the immediate supervision of my son, the future Rebbe, and me, in whichever capacity they listen to my Marim on a regular basis." That never existed before. I think on purpose. I think the idea was people need distance to be able to internalize what the Rebbe is saying and what the message is. If you're always there, it's like looking at the sun the whole day.
You're blinded.
You can't look at the sun. You have to look at the sunlight. I was actually, we were talking earlier about how I do video production. I was talking to a colleague, and he was telling me how he was trying to recreate the sun in the window. I said, no, you don't create the sun in the window. You recreate the sunlight in the window. It's impossible to recreate the sun, nor do you want it. It's gross. It's too much. For a camera, it's gross. For the world, it's beautiful. But so there was always that understanding of distance, and then it seemed to collapse, right? I was talking on an earlier episode with, I think it was Ruvinu, and Old Torah became a thing for younger Bachrim in the late or mid Mems. Until then, no younger Bachrim came to Crown Heights, and it became a thing to be there from a young age to basically cook in the soup, in it.
Yeah.
So it's not, it's a real thing.
So actually, you remind me of a conversation I had with a friend back then. I was there for 1 year and I was alone. I was the only American kid there. So I went back for the second year. I wanted to get a friend to come along.
Right.
And he says, no, I want to stay here. I want to be by the Rebbe. And I made the argument that your growth and your appreciation can occur to a greater degree from this distance.
Right.
And we had this debate. I went back alone.
You went back alone.
I went back alone.
Was there a sense at the time? It's a very interesting conversation you would have with your friend, and in a way, it's like it makes total sense. It makes total sense. It's regular Bachram having a conversation. Which yeshiva should we go to? Oh, I'm in Al Torah and this and that, and I'm in Lud. Why when you're in Lud? And there's the ultimate kind of flex. What am I? Who's doing it better? And you laid out your case, and he laid out his case. It feels very normal. Mm-hmm. Was there at all a sense at the time that the clock is ticking?
No, never.
Explain that a little bit.
The clock didn't move. The clock was stationary. There's no such thing as the past. It's just that the present is expanding. So it's no such thing as something is going to be gone, is going to disappear.
But the Rebbe had passed away a couple of years earlier. I mean,
sure, but we never did a kavos with the Rebbetzin or listened to the Rebbetzin Chazar and Maimer.
But you didn't understand that the Rebbe was getting older?
No.
Really?
Yeah, again, yeah. Time.
See, because you had that consciousness to realize that it's not working out for me here. I have to go there. So you clearly were thinking in a way for yourself and iconoclastic about it. And you're saying that even then there was no sense of how could I go to Eretz Yisrael? Who knows how much longer we got of this?
Not a chance.
Really?
That it wasn't. No, that idea, that concept, and again, time.
Because Mashiach would come, or because
time paused.
But it didn't. It paused for your life. I mean, you were thinking about becoming a lawyer. That's not pausing. You weren't staying.
Okay, that was before. I saw things differently. It became.
So back then, you did realize that there was a time.
I was too young. I was still a kid. But no, time.
But time paused for everything, or just for the Rebbe? That's my question.
Well, listen.
People got older. People got married. People had kids.
Okay, but I was a kid then. I was 15, 16 years old. You're not aware of aging. You're not aware of time passing by. You're not aware of death of. And I don't mean death of moments, death of eras. You never experience that.
Yeah, I mean, it's fair enough to say that at 15, 16, you're not thinking in these kind of terms of mortality in general. But I guess I'm asking if there was ever a sense in the community of like chaperein, like we don't know how much longer this is going to last.
Unquestionably not.
It's so interesting.
Unquestionably not.
And you think this is all because of the Mashiach thing? The Mashiach is going to come, or even without Mashiach coming?
Even without Mashiach coming.
The Rebbe is going to be the first person to live forever? We just don't think about it.
We don't think about it. Here's very important. What we don't speak about doesn't exist.
Back to the Russians.
Yeah. It's just human nature. You don't talk about something that doesn't exist. You don't have a word for it.
Right.
It never happened. So there's another point here. You're constantly getting new experiences, particularly in an Aleph and in base. My goodness, I was being a Baruch Yisrael back then. You waited for the Sicha, the Rad from that previous week's Rabbangan and the Dvar Malchus, as if it was a news update.
Right.
Like what is happening in the world.
Yeah, it's your whole reality.
Exactly. So it's new stuff coming out all the time. So no, there was no sense whatsoever that we got to chaperein.
Yeah, I mean, I guess, look, if I want to be kind of balanced here and to check my own questioning, there are a lot of people that will say that this country like America, it has a lot of problems. It has a lot of very concerning problems, right? And some people will say, in a few years, you never know what this country is going to look like. And it's very hard to contemplate that. It's very hard to really believe that the reality that you're so used to, could actually just kind of fall apart. And, But it's still, to me, it's still very, very interesting that you're saying that it was an idea that was so off limits. Because
It wasn't off
because
limits.
I'm not even necessarily talking about passing away. I kind of understand that. You say it wasn't off limits; it didn't even exist.
Yeah.
Well, because it was never spoken about.
Yeah, but didn't feel like it was. It didn't even. It didn't feel like that was like a place you don't go to.
It wasn't like we don't speak about it.
Yeah.
It just doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, forget about even passing away. There was a time where the Rebbe took Yechidus, and then he stopped taking any Yechidus. There was a time where he said Mamarim, and then he stopped saying Mamarim. There were Tkufas. So, like, you could say, this Tkufa is going to end. But even that wasn't.
Sure. Here's my point earlier. We see, at least we were taught to see it, and we were sworn, and we explained, the Rebbe explained it this way, that it's not a regression, it's a progression. So the lack of marital, the lack of Yechidus is a progression. There's a progression. So we don't lose the past. We're taking the past and we're moving it forward. We're constantly. That's what I mean. That's what I mean to say that time doesn't exist. Time in the sense of the past being dead, or the past being something that is no longer, doesn't exist. The past is just being in the present, just expanding and expanding and expanding and expanding. So.
But that sounds wonderful on paper, right? But what's fascinating to me is how it plays out in people's day-to-day lives. Because you made a very interesting point before, which I've thought about quite a bit in general, which is that, the Shabbos Farbrengens were very exciting and very child stimulating and uplifting. I don't remember if you use those words, but, it was a moment, but the rest of the week is the rest of the week. And, it's the same problem that we have with memory. Like when you look back at this past year, for example, you remember moments and you create very quickly a narrative. But when you have to live through the year, there's the days that are grind, and they're the days that basically they don't kind of stick out in either way. That's what makes them a grind. They're not terribly bad. They're not terribly good. They're just there. And when you're living through it, it's it sucks something out of you, right? And so to me, the distinction that you made was that, there's this narrative about being in Chanites at the time, but then there was the real lived life, which I find very relatable and very believable. But then you're telling me that when it comes to the Rebbe, there was no such distinction. The way the Rebbe spoke about time got translated into how you lived it too.
Particularly as a bacher.
It's fascinating.
A bacher, you don't live in what would be considered real. You don't think about your future.
Right.
You don't think about, you're not investing in something moving forward. You're just very present in the current experience. And that's what makes a bacher life and education so valuable.
Right. And temporary. We'll get to that soon.
Yes.
Well, yeah, no, we'll get to it.
Okay.
I think there's plenty of value in that part of life, but sometimes I think it gets carried away. But looking back now, to kind of focus on that point, looking back now, how do you understand, or how do you view the Bacher Sheyarn? Do you feel, damn it, I should have known better? I mean, I could even make the question a bit sharper for you. I don't know if it's a bit...
Go as sharp as you can.
No, I'm saying, like, do you regret now not realizing that the Rebbe was getting older and that going to Eretz Yisrael meant that you missed out on 2 years? I'm saying, like, how do you look back at that?
I look back at it very fondly, extraordinarily fondly. I look back at it with that during those 2 years, I had a far greater appreciation and understanding and connection with the Rebbe, what was always going on, as a result of the fact that I did have that distance, that I'd say in a certain sense, I wasn't distracted. I was laser focused on the sichas, the marital, the learning that was going on in my life at that time, and I'm very grateful that I did that I was there. And I think that I know for certain, had I not been there then, I would not be here today. And I'm certain, and I know that what I got there in those 2 years is actually a little less than 2 years. Carries with me in a very meaningful, deep way till today. And
It's so interesting. Did so? Let me fill out the story a little bit before I ask the question I wanted to ask. What happened after the stroke? You stayed on in Eretz Yisrael
No, I actually came home
right after the stroke.
for Pesach,
Okay.
and I stayed on.
You stayed in New York.
I stayed in New York.
Why?
A number of reasons.
Had you been planning to come back to New York, like at some point around then?
I was going to come home, because of Chav Zayin Adar, so I said I want to go home for Pesach. I would have stayed otherwise in Eretz Yisrael for Pesach with my family.
No, I'm saying the next year, were you planning on coming back to America? Was that in the plans?
I don't know what my actual plan was. It was Shir Gimel, so I did have to make a decision, but I wasn't thinking about what my decision for the next year is. But I came back, and I guess there was a sense of something's really, unique and special is going on over here. So I'll stick around. This was after the stroke.
You're talking what do you mean by anything special? Mashiach Zeiten, Mashiach has to come? That kind of?
I suppose. Yeah, I suppose. Yeah, there's yeah. Yeah. Just going back into that, bring my head back to that time. Right. Unquestionably, yes. Oh, yes.
Is it hard for you to go back to that time?
No.
Is it hard to toggle between?
It is because it is in that sense, in the sense that it's the world. I see the world differently today than when I saw it as a 16-year-old. The world I live in is a different world. Is a different world. The world I interact with is a different world. So yes, I need to toggle back in my conscious, but in my subconscious, it's very present.
So you think it was only that you were 16 years old, not that there was. I mean, there was just a different sense of reality.
There was unquestionably there was a different sense of reality.
Right. So when you go back in time, do you feel like going back, all your priors have to change, to understand yourself and the people around you back then? Do you feel like you have to change a lot of your priors, your fundamentals to understand how people spoke? Like you look back at those times, and you remember some conversations, the way people spoke at the Shabbos table, whatever. Are they in your mind today? Are they Looney Tunes? Are they it's such a different reality, right? So how do you look at them? Forget about your 16-year-old self, which is obviously younger.
It was a deeply, deeply mystical reality. The world was mystical on its highest level. And we're talking about the most mystical being. We're talking about the Rebbe here.
Right.
So everything was on a different plane. And you saw the world through that. And you experienced everything through that. So, in a sense, the stroke was fake. Not fake in the sense that it didn't happen, but it has no control.
Right.
It's
part of a story.
It's part of a story. It's part of a choice. It's part of a choice. And I just wanted to be nearby as it unfolds.
Wow. So in a way, at least in your experience, what had been in the past a kind of dry atmosphere, apart from the few moments here and there was verbringen, had now turned, it kind of exploded into a fully saturated mystical atmosphere, which you hadn't sensed before.
Yeah, but all the rules have been broken.
Right.
The rules of reality, meaning to say, the Rebbe's health, the Rebbe's continued presence. The Rebbe's stroke was never supposed to happen.
Right.
Chazan was not supposed to happen.
Right.
That was there's a mistake here. So there's going to be a correction.
Right.
And I want to be there for be there at the correction.
And that sense of seeing it in this positive mystical light that lasted for the next 2 years?
Unquestionably.
Really?
Yeah.
Because it's so interesting. Somebody, I was speaking to someone earlier, and about the recent podcast I did with Moshe Greenwald, and he spoke about those times he wasn't even in Crown Heights. He was in Long Beach. Anyway, that podcast, like it or hate it, whatever, but a bunch of people reacted to it with their own memories of that time. And there's like a lot of negativity, bitterness, like that those were the toughest times. And it's interesting that you feel otherwise. I'm not questioning it. Like, not everyone has to see things the same way.
Yeah. The tougher time, I'd say, is after Gimel Tammuz.
After Gimel Tammuz.
Yeah, and I won't say immediately. I'm talking about that's, and now we're looking back, and I say, you're asking me back then at the time.
Right. Yeah, I am.
Right. I'm looking back. It looks a little differently. I think about it differently.
Right.
But back then at the time, no, it was. Here's at the core, and see. Now I'm a shlichus now 20 plus years, and people trying to always wondering what is Chabad about.
Right.
We are mystics.
Yeah.
We are mystics. We see the world mystically. We feel the world mystically.
That run marathons.
I make the point. We're not mystics in the mountains of the Himalayas.
Right.
We're mystics on Fifth Avenue.
Right.
We're mystics in Middle America.
Right.
But we are mystics. We don't see the world the way normal people see the world.
I think that's true.
That's why we look the way we look. We are a beer that's just a mystical. We when we see another Yid, we get all excited that they're going to put on tefillin. That's mystical. Right. We move out to communities with nothing just to start something because we see the world mystically.
Right.
Chav Zayin Adar, before and after, was mysticism, being mystical beings in its most concentrated form. Mm-hmm. What you're observing with your physical eyes is fake. There's a mystical reality that is occurring over here. Mm. And that is what many of us, me included, were totally tapped into.
So interesting. Yeah. I mean, the way you're describing it makes a lot of sense to me. You're almost describing to me that, like, growing, especially because you had grown up, at least from a young age in Crown Heights, the kind of week in, week out Farbrengens or the system around the Rebbe, there's a routinization to it. You kind of get used to it. You get used to the holiness. It's you can package it. It's that time of the week, but the rest of the week is regular, right?
Yeah.
Is that fair?
Yeah, I would say even better, more than that. Even the Farbrengens themselves are routinized. So as a kid, I didn't go to Farbrengens. In fact, when I was in the second grade.
Right. And most of your friends did go to the Farbrengens?
No, some did, some didn't. Most
that's a lot to ask of a second grader, anyhow. Yeah.
No, but I was at a rally. This is a children's rally. A friend of mine just got an Atari. Atari was like the first video games.
Before Game Boy.
Before Game Boy. This is like 1982, 1980. You got an Atari.
I think I've heard of it, yes.
Atari. Okay. And me and him slipped out of the rally, went to his house and played Atari and played video games. And in the second grade, Rebbe's looking around, where are these two kids? My mother gets a call, your kid disappeared. He's not at the rally anymore.
Right.
I walked home and I got it over my head, running away from the rally.
The issue was that you were that it was not safe, or that you were not a good Lubavitcher kid?
Not safe.
Not safe.
Not safe. But the sentiment is, no, being at a rally, being at a Farbrengen wasn't interesting for me personally, until I turned 12.
Right.
Then it started getting a little interesting.
Right. Do you get pushback today when you make these observations?
Honestly, I
you don't care.
No, I don't care. I rarely had this conversation. On college, on Brandeis, nobody really cares for it.
Fair enough. I understand that it doesn't happen on the regular, but no, it's just it's a very honest. I mean, how do you judge honesty? I sense it's honest, and it's not the typical. So that kind of is another check in the direction of it being honest. But it's a very different take, let's say, without casting any judgment on it one way or another. It's a very different take of how people speak about those years, and I think it's important to at least see it as a take of those years. Yeah. And what you're describing to me is that there's a routinization that happens, which makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I remember I wasn't there. I grew up 10 years after you. I grew up in Hong Kong. So if you listen to the podcast, they've heard I wasn't there. But I remember years later, just a few years ago, I was working on a video project, and it was about a few Baal Teshuvos who had come to Lubavitch in the 70s, and one of them ended up living in Crown Heights. David Laz, Dr. Laz, the famous Dr. Laz, a great friend of mine, a great man. He lived in Crown Heights for a couple of years, and he has very interesting insights into that time. I think he lived like the times that we're describing, the early nuns, I think, is when he lived there. Anyway, so for the purpose of the documentary, he was very involved at the time with interracial relations, and he had a friend, Father Richard. I don't remember anymore. It was a few years ago. So I was looking for footage of the Crown Heights riots, and you can find footage online, or I think I licensed footage from NBC or what have you. One of the TV stations sent me raw footage to review, to pick out which moments I want. And now I'm seeing Crown Heights like ungemified. It's not the Rebbe.
Have you just created a new term? I'm hearing this for the first time.
This is what I do.
You're the ungemifier?
No. I make up words.
Okay.
I don't know. They don't teach us English in Lubavitch, so we make up words. I don't know.
We have our own dictionary.
Yes, sir. Or mystics, like you said.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mystics don't talk in words; they talk in letters. Anyway, so. It was not packaged. It was not a Rebbe video, certainly, but it also wasn't like the Rebbe's Chutzner. It was a video on a random Tuesday of the front doors of 770, and I start seeing people, some of whom I recognize, coming out of 770 and bull shoving.
Yes,
but like right there, like the Rebbe's right. The Rebbe's behind you. He's like 10 feet from you.
The place was full of that.
10 feet from you, like and like it's like this is exactly what it looks like today. So don't come to me with a story about how everyone those days was under like
bull, load of bull. I'll add to that. Now it's coming back to me. During the Farbrengens, what were most kids doing? They were outside playing.
Right.
They were in the back playing kugelach.
Right.
You'd often listen. They were running up and down the tanks. They were playing baseball, football, whatever. Not baseball. We used to sit outside and play like this, some type of kids form of baseball. You remember players' names and positions.
Right.
That's what most kids were doing.
Right. I'm talking about adults in the video.
Okay, but I can speak from this.
Yeah. No, but it's like the point is not to say the whole thing is fake and the whole thing is baloney. The point is that a part of the narrative is made up. Right. The narrative takes on a life of its own, and the narrative basically collapses a very complex layering of reality. Where there's, you help yourself to the next one.
No. Every time you say narrative, it like
we're foreshadowing over here. But I mean, like it's just. So what's a point? I'm trying to like dig here and krich and like what am I trying to get out of it? First of all, I find it interesting. So that's the main criteria for a conversation for me. But I think. It's very important. Narrative. I mean, I make a living with narratives, right? That's how you get people to donate to a campaign. That's how you get people to buy into a brand. It's all about narratives, right? We live dominated by narratives. That's why people write books. That's why everything. Lubavitch is a narrative. Basel is a narrative. Everything's a narrative. Chassidus is a narrative. How do you see the world? Here is. It's a narrative. It's a true narrative, but it's a narrative. We live in narratives, right? So narratives are super important, and narratives are how we live our lives. Mm-hmm. And the problem with narratives is that you can get carried away with the narrative, and you can begin to mistake the narrative for something not that's more than a narrative, right? So the narrative of those years being the best years and the gute Zeiten, I'm not saying that that's not true, but there was a whole world going on around that.
Outside the frame.
Exactly. right, using camera language here, right? Outside the frame, exactly, right? There's that people are stunned when you film and how much you see. I mean, it's more than that, right? There are famous tests that they've made where they've had people, you're talking about outside the frame, I'm talking about even inside the frame. There's a famous psychological test, I forget the name of it, where they had people looking at looking like at a screen at the frame, and they were supposed to focus on like balls bouncing or something and know how many times it bounced, and they had monkeys running
gorilla.
through a gorilla running through the frame, and people didn't even notice it.
That
Right?
we'll get to that later. That is an
Okay, you can stay overnight then. All these things are pushing up for later. But my point is that like it's not just out of the frame; it's even in the frame. The problem with narratives is that even in the frame, you don't notice certain things, and we have no choice. We got to live with narratives, right? But at least recognize that it's a narrative. It's not everything.
You said two words here.
Okay.
That are sometimes that are competing: narrative and noticing.
Right.
Narrative, in a certain sense, often precedes you into a certain circumstance and certain experience.
Right.
Noticing is what you do in the experience itself.
Right.
Now the question is the narrative. Where does it come from? How did it come about? But the key is to notice.
Right.
It's a skill. It's an art, and I'm going to make the claim that that's the skill of a chassid, Chabad.
Let's make it right now. No need to push it off. I think we have a wonderful foundation here to get there. So, what do you mean? What do you mean by that? What do you mean by the skill of noticing, and what do you mean by that being the skill of a chassid?
Well, I don't know what angle to bring it into, but essentially, our goal as Chabad Chassidim, shluchim, Chabad Chassidim, I use that interchangeably. It's one and the same. Is in a certain sense that we have a mission, we have a goal, and that mission and goal is to, lasis leidira b'tachtainim, right?
Right.
Okay. One of the key words is the tachtainim.
Right.
Tachtainim is the reality as it is for itself.
Right.
Like, the begidra tachtainim. To live begidra tachtainim, you have to notice begidra tachtainim. Generally, a mystic is the idea where you live in a narrative that's outside of the reality. You don't notice. You don't pay attention. You're able to ignore.
Right.
Okay?
Escape.
A Chabad Chassid is not to escape. A Chabad Chassid is to engage.
Right.
To engage, you need to notice.
Right.
To engage, you need to, in a certain sense, step out of a narrative. To step out of a narrative that preceded you into a certain situation and see what is going on in that particular circumstance, and then bring change to it. Okay? That is very hard to do, particularly as a mystic. I'm going to go back, where we have so many strong narratives.
Right.
So many strong narratives. And so many sanctified narratives and so many authentic narratives.
Right.
That in a certain sense, it makes it difficult for us to do our work, our job, our mission as chassidim and shluchim. Now, where is the space within which we do this? What do we need to notice? The notice begins first within ourselves. First within ourselves, and then in the particular orbit that we have, whether it's in your little community, whether it's amongst your friends, whether it's in your city, whatever your shlichus may look like. And that's a skill that we need to develop, which in a certain sense, we're going back to like the growing up years, right?
Right.
The growing up years, the bacher years. There it's really not about noticing. There it's about learning the narratives.
Interesting.
We're learning the narrative. We need to be fully enmeshed in the narratives.
Right. Indoctrination is not necessarily a bad term.
It's not it's not a bad term at all. It
doesn't have to be a bad term.
It's development. The problem is
saying soldiers are also indoctrinated.
Yeah, yes.
Everybody's indoctrinated.
If you want to do something great, you need to believe in something, connect to something great as well.
Right.
And that great thing precedes you, and it's given to you by great people. Okay? We need to adapt it. We need to be immersed in it, and that's what the bacher years are. That's what Temchet Mimim is, or Beis Rivka is. That's what the education role is. However, there needs to be a shift at a certain point in time, and that's when you leave yeshiva, when you start a family. You need to shift away from focusing on the narrative to noticing what is happening in your reality, and then learn how to have agency over your reality by bringing change to it, positive change, which is another word for growth. The thing, though, is, the challenge is, we are in yeshiva, we're so focused on the narrative, which, again, I stay to that, and we're guided in it, but noticing
Right.
that we're not given guidance, that we have to figure out on our own.
Right.
And we don't have schools for that.
Right.
We don't have systems for that. We don't have environments for that.
Well, by definition, you can't. But you have anti-noticing environments.
Yeah, you have anti-noticing, but our goal is to learn chassidus,
Right.
and I guess that'll take us to Farbrengens. Farbrengens are the playground where noticing occurs. Meaning to say, when you're learning a mimer, you're in the narrative world.
Right.
Okay. When you are sort of coming home or riding the street, or you're in the noticing phase. How do you bridge the two?
Right.
Where the bridging of the two occurs in the Farbrengen, because a Farbrengen is both a conversation about the idea, the narrative, but it's also a conversation about your reality, what's going on in your life, what you're working through, how you're trying, and you're doing it with a peer, with friends,
Right.
and you're sharing, you're listening, you're diving deep, and then you pause to sing, to zaganigen, to take you places where you otherwise can't go, and it's done with love and care.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very interesting way of looking at it, and in many ways is a very helpful way of looking at it, because there is this kind of tension between the Baruch Yarin and the later and afterwards, and it's like, if it doesn't work for me later on, there is an impulse, and I'm guilty of it myself, to look back and say, okay, that's a load of rubbish. What were you doing? What were you doing there? What were you teaching me? What kind of nonsense? And it certainly is a thing to think about, and does push back against some things that I've probably said on this podcast, and said, and think all the time. What you're suggesting is that there is a time and place for narratives. There's a time and place for even indoctrination. There's a time and place for put your mind aside. What does it say in Chassidus? I don't know if it comes from Chassidus or comes from the Gemara, that in the time that you're sitting in front of your Rav as a Talmud, you close off your own thoughts and you're makabel. There's a time to just be makabel, be an empty vessel, and just accept and let knowledge and wisdom that predates you and is bigger than you and precedes you on every level, let it come in, give you something to work with. Yes. Right? So it's definitely I accept that. It's something that I have to think about, and it pushes back against some of my own priors. And it helps me frame it as well. I guess the obvious question that you alluded to it as well, is that the problem with, and we discussed it earlier about narratives, is that when you're in the world of narratives, in many ways, it's anti-noticing. It's not just that you don't notice; it's anti-noticing. And as I'm thinking about it, I don't know that the two have to be opposites, right? Like, for example, you mentioned mystics. I don't know if you mentioned Hashgacha Pratis, but the famous, I think it's from the Baal Shem Tov, maybe it comes from earlier, but the famous kind of story that we're told about Hashgacha Pratis is the leaf over the worm, right? The leaf blowing in the wind and eventually lands and it covers a worm. That's the ultimate noticing. You could talk about Hashgacha Pratis in very lofty, abstract terms, but noticing is picking up the leaf and seeing the worm, right? I think that's somewhere where, like, I don't know that the two have to be narrative up to marriage and then figure out how to notice on your own when you're already outside of the kind of seclusion or protected space. I think the narrative is one of noticing.
So we're taught that.
Right.
We're taught that the narrative requires you to notice. The narrative teaches you. The narrative teaches you about Tira B'Tachtedim. The narrative teaches you about the idea of Aveda with your Nefesh Habahamis. It teaches you about Lahavim Musasim. It teaches you that. But it's not the playground where you're actually practicing it. I want to speak, the notice, I'll use the narrative and noticing are in certain ways mutually are exclusive. in some ways, in the sense that their narrative was written externally, outsourced.
Saying by the Rebbe?
Yeah, by their Abayim, by your Mashpim, whatever it may be.
Right.
Okay, then and we all and the narrative we all share together, and the narrative has an element of authenticity to it. It's real. It's true.
Right.
Okay, the noticing is uniquely yours.
Right.
It's uniquely so. So in a certain sense, it doesn't. You question its authenticity.
Right.
But it is uniquely yours. It's what I call insourced. And it's why, in a certain sense, the Eibusha sword fit. Is for there to be a Ben Siaftzen, and why the Eibusha sword is to be a Peretz Chein.
Right.
And each one of us have our unique realities that are so different, and we each have a mission of Lasis Leidira B'Tachtenim, and that Tachtenim is our own personal lives.
Right.
Noticing it and bringing change to it. The playground, I'll go to that word, or the factory where narratives occur is Yeshiva. The factory we're noticing, and I'll go to the word of Avoda, and Avoda Pnimis, meaning it's uniquely yours, uniquely mine. That occurs outside, in the place where you are alone.
I accept the distinction of narrative and noticing. I'm not sure though that they have to be, and I also accept what you said about there's something that's communal and there's individual, and by definition you cannot have it both ways. Like what is uniquely yours and is terribly lonely. It's just how it is, right?
Yes.
You cannot have it both ways. You can't at some point, coming to terms with your existence and the way you're in your life means that you will have to figure it out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
The more, right? And in many ways this is part of, I feel like I shouldn't open this kind of worms. The whole thing of therapy as the instinct, like as if the modus operandi of living your life in a way, nice, you have to deal with it on your own. So yes, you can ask for assistance, but at some point you have to live on your own, like that, and that's not a problem. That's good.
That's how life was built.
Right. That's how life was built.
That's the Eibusha built us.
Right. But I think no. So I accept the distinction. I think it's pretty straightforward. I just think though that here's a problem when you have a yeshiva that basically teaches a narrative, and then that narrative by definition falls apart because now everybody's out on their own, whether it's on shlichus, which is l'maliosa, even in the eyes of yeshiva, or whether it's not so l'maliosa, they're just in business or whatever, living their lives. The assumption that somehow the individual who has not been trained to think for themselves can somehow pick up the pieces on their own is asking someone to assemble an aircraft in midair.
I agree with you on that.
Right?
The skill and the ability, yeah. Right. It's very hard, and we're not taught it.
We're not taught it. It has to be taught in yeshivas. I don't think it can be outside, because you're making the distinction between inside and outside yeshivas. No, it has to be taught in the yeshivas.
Sure. I won't debate. I won't resist that. I think it has to be. Yeah. Sure. I'm not in the world of yeshivas.
No, I'm not telling what yeshivas to do either.
Right.
It's easy for me to talk from the cheap seats.
But I do think that in a certain sense, perhaps, I had this like Gedank once, that mashpim, before they become mashpim, they have to leave yeshiva and get a job for 5 years and just live in the world outside of yeshiva for 5 years, or Rosh Yeshiva as well, and then come back.
I hate to inform you that some will accuse you of listening to this podcast, because I think we spoke about it a few weeks ago. So Baruch Shekivanti. And all ideas come from somewhere. I guess it came from you.
No, I just thought, in other words, many mashpim and Rosh Yeshivas are just bachrim.
With white beards, yeah.
Yeah, or what I call sometimes, not the mashpim Rosh Yeshivas, I call just adults in general. Many, they're children with mortgages.
Yeah, fair.
Growing up is a huge deal.
Right, and it doesn't happen on its own.
It can't happen on its own.
Yeah, I was just thinking about it this morning. My eldest daughter went to camp for the first time, which is always a milestone, and in my view a happy milestone. And I was thinking, the common kind of refrains that people, it's, how time flies, crazy how she's grown up. I began to think, I was like, no. Time has passed for her, but also for me. I'm not surprised by any of this. Like, have I not grown up in the past 10 years? Like, why? What's so shocking? Like, and I I feel like in many ways, look, I love my daughter to death. And it's been beautiful to see her flourish, but I'm not convinced that that from 0 to 10 or 1 to 11 is necessarily a larger leap in thinking about the world than from 25 to 35. And I don't think it has to be. She's doing what she needs to do at her age, and at that age, I think it does come naturally. The curiosity and the growth kind of happens on its own, right? Physically and mentally. But at a later age, you're supposed to have, like you said, enough foundation, enough narrative that now you grow, right? And if you're not going to grow taller, at least put on some muscle, or at least don't grow the other way,
Yeah. No. There's this notion that the best years of our lives was the Bacher years when we were in Yeshiva. I don't subscribe to that at all.
Yeah, good on you. Amen.
My best years, and I'm talking about spiritually, Chassidishkeit and all that, is today.
Right, and ahead of you.
Far more, and ahead of me, but far more than in my yeshiva years.
Why do you say so?
For one, the test of it is how I learn a mimer today and how I learned a mimer in yeshiva.
Right.
I learn a mimer today. It's far richer, far deeper, far more meaningful than when I learned it as a bacher. And I was learning as a bacher.
Right.
I put in a lot of hours on it in Chassidus and in Igla.
Right.
But now what I see in a mimer, what I learn in a mimer, is so much more exciting, so much deeper, so much more alive and relevant.
How much of that has to do with the fact that it's simply a choice now? Like, you have to choose to do that compared to back then.
No, it was a choice then too. I could have just bummed around.
I see.
It was a choice then. But my life experience, my needing to think things deeper and in a more practical way, meaningful, realistic way, requires me to appreciate and push into the mimer in a way that otherwise I couldn't do.
Right. Yeah. No, I can second that. When I do sit down and learn, and it's not as often as it should be.
We all suffer from that.
No, I'm not saying to be humble. It's literally.
Likewise. Likewise.
I'm not some kind of secret maskell over here. You don't know about it because it's not happening. But when I do sit down, usually it's a Shabbos morning, or sometimes it happens in the middle of the week, and I don't know. I feel like either I don't have something on the docket for the day, or I feel like I need some. I don't know. Who knows why? You're right. When I sit down, and I learn it, very often it's things that I've learned in the past. I return to things I've learned in the past, and it hits different. It hits different, and the language is different. The language is different. And I think a lot of it has to do also with the fact that, your mind matures over time. I think scientifically your mind doesn't settle until you're 30. I think that's when people really, on an average, settle down. That's way after your Bacher Shiyar. Yes, I don't think there's anything to dispute. I don't think
there's another thing besides your mind developing, and this is the key over here, is your life experiences have accumulated.
Yeah, no, I'm just adding to what you said.
And,
yes.
And here's where problems begin.
Right. Okay.
Here's where problems begin. Your life experiences start accumulating.
Right.
Meaning to say, you got married. Okay. You're now living with another person.
Right. Another
human being who is very different than you.
Yes.
Okay.
A woman.
A woman, but also both a woman and just another person.
No, but I'm saying coming out of yeshiva, that's completely foreign to
right,
you.
But it take a couple of years. You'll
get used to it.
You'll get used to it.
All right. I'll take your word for it.
No, but the point is, it doesn't have to do with yeshiva. It's just the being of a man and being of a woman.
Right.
Okay. And then there is, when children come.
Right.
And as they grow older, mortgages come, communities come, responsibilities come. All these realities start emerging. All these experiences start emerging.
Right.
Now, there are a couple. How do you respond to that? So, one way to respond to that is you stick to the narrative.
Right.
You stick to the narrative that allows you to gloss over and to ignore the realities and experiences that emerge.
Right.
And it works for the first 5, 10, maybe 15, 10 years. But then one of two things happen. Either it just collapses, the realities just overwhelm you.
Right.
Or another thing happens is you remain static as a person. You don't grow. You don't change. You don't become something bigger and deeper as a result of the rich offerings that your life experience provide you.
Right.
And that's where I'm going to go back to this, where noticing comes in, and then there's more than noticing. There's also taking what you notice and making it into a life lesson, and then putting it into practice and changing. It's very hard. Adulting is hard.
Adulting is hard. And now I know you're a college campus shliach.
Oh,
the word adulting.
My goodness, I mean that's what we do with the students. That's what our shlichus is, to help them. If we want our students
right.
to change Yiddishkeit wise, to be deeper connected to Yiddishkeit and change in their lives, then we need to teach them how to change. I actually had an interesting change story.
Go ahead.
With Rebbe Steinsaltz.
Okay.
I was in Tzemach Tzedek. This was a very transformative experience. I was in Tzemach Tzedek for Shabbos. Happened 10 years ago.
Well, that shows a transformative experience one way or another.
So we were sitting next to each other, and I introduced myself as a shliach of Brandeis, and he happened to be honored. I got an honor degree from Brandeis before I even came.
Years earlier.
Years earlier, by a few years, 2-3 years. So, and I was feeling really good about what we're doing on campus. We, we checked all the boxes, the numbers, the relationships, what we call the impacts, and the programs, and blah. He asked me, "Are you changing lives?" I was taken aback. I started stammering, and said, "Well, if you're not changing lives, then kill yourself."
What are you even doing here? He said the words "kill yourself."
Yeah, kill yourself. Then he asked me.
You have to paint the picture a little bit of Rabbi Steinsaltz and Tzemach Tzedek shul.
Okay.
Paint the picture a little bit.
Okay.
I mean, this is a small little shul, and Rabbi Steinsaltz would usually come to davening a little bit late.
Because you have to walk a distance.
Yeah.
And it was a hot summer day.
And I lived in Yerushalayim for one summer,
Okay.
and I davened there I think once or twice. He usually came late to davening, and everybody knows Rabbi Steinsaltz was this short, small man. He sits in the back of shul, very unassuming.
Where I was sitting, so.
And you would think, if you didn't know better, that he is the shul-let. He is laughing hysterically about God knows what. And you should go kill yourself.
And then he asks me, so if you were to do it, what method of suicide would you choose?
That's what he told you?
Yeah, so we went into a little conversation about that. And I made a recommendation, he made another recommendation, and then we just moved on. But the point is, he asked me a very direct, pointed question. Are you changing your lives?
Right.
If you're not introducing change into people's lives, then who needs you?
Right.
What are you doing? I'll take that a little further. If I want to change other people's lives, I need to learn how to bring change into my life.
Right.
That's what Aveda is.
Right.
That's what Aveda Pnimis is. That's what being a Chabad Chassid is. And I would even go as far as to argue that's what the calling of Vata Tetzava is. And Gimel Tammuz. But we'll leave that for another time.
Let's see if we can get there. I don't want to jump too fast. Yeah, you said so many things over there. If you want to change someone else's life, you have to change your life. Yeah, I think going back to the idea of narrative, I think there is a understandable. I grew up on shlichus. I grew up immersed in the narrative of shlichus, and I, for whatever one may think, I don't look at it negatively. I think there's a lot of beauty to it. Very often I regret that my kids aren't growing up with a lot of that of what I grew up with. Some things not, but a lot yes. And one of the narratives of shlichus is that we have the deal, and we have the stuff, and we have to share it with those people.
You know what that
But-
makes us?
Right. What's that?
You know what that makes us?
Missionaries.
Salespeople.
Yeah, and there's a famous line, I forget which shliach said, I'm not God's policeman, I'm God's salesman. And yeah, no comment. But
I disagree with that notion.
yeah, I assume. But I'm saying, like, not to beat up on a throwaway line, but to me, based on what you're talking about, like, it's more that, like, how can you even sell change if you don't know what change is yourself, right? Not to mention that, how can you sell change when what you're selling never changes itself, right? The Eibishter is the thing that's able to be non-changing and affecting change all at the same time. But you're not God, so stop playing God. Everybody else, if they want to, what's the saying in Chassidus? Anything that moves something, kol mania misnanea.
It's more it's a philosophical.
Yes, it comes from earlier.
Greek philosophy.
Yeah, sure, it's from Aristotelian.
Yeah.
But I'm saying it's quoted in Chassidus, right?
Yes.
It comes from much earlier.
Yeah.
That anything that moves has to be moved itself,
Yes.
right? And like the narrative of shlichus very often is, or even Lubavitch in general, is we got the answers. Al tikra vayikra el vayakre. Like the focus is not on vayikra, the focus is on vayakre. Whoever knows Aleph Beis needs to teach Aleph Beis. And I say, wait a second. It doesn't say, when you say Al tikra vayikra el vayakre, it doesn't mean the vayikra disappears. It means that there's both. There's both. And when it says that when you know Aleph, you teach Aleph, for God's sake, know Aleph, right? You cannot teach Aleph without knowing it. You cannot teach change without knowing change. I think Moshe Gray made the comment on one of the earlier podcasts. He's like, he started getting into lifting weights, and he's like, to make that part of my life was brutal. And here I'm convincing people and demanding from people to basically upend not just their hour of the day of physical habits, but to upend their entire identity and understanding of the world. You cannot be a mystic if your life is static. Impossible.
Yes, you can. Yes, and 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 yes.
Right.
So much yes to what you're saying.
Well, I'm agreeing with you. So
No,
unless you change your mind.
No, it's unquestionably now.
So we're talking in connection to the adult years of after yeshiva, and I do want, part of the richness of this experience of having this podcast is the feedback, and sometimes the feedback comes directly, people that know me or people find me out, and sometimes it comes secondhand. Someone forwards me a message or tells me about a comment that they got, and someone told me about a comment that they got. There was a conversation that was happening between him and someone else. I don't know who that other person is, but that other person is on shlichus. From what I understood, close to 10 years, at least over 5 years. And that person told the friend of mine that, in yeshiva, they told me I'm realizing as I get older, he said two things, and those two things broke me. Okay, he says two things. He says, first of all, I'm learning that in yeshiva they were very good at teaching us the nasa, but not so good at teaching us the nishma. He's like, I am on shlichus for a bunch of years, and if you ask me today, I can't explain to you why. That's number one.
Okay.
I'm kind of setting things up for you over here. I didn't even mean to, but I'm setting things up to you.
Okay.
And number two, and in a way this is more pertinent to our general conversation, he says, look, as I've been getting older, I've been always telling myself that the voice that I should trust is the voice from the Bacher Sheyarn. That voice is pure. That voice is idealistic. It's protected from the world. It's pure. What the hergeshim that come from there, the feelings that I had then and the feelings that I remember from then, those are holy. And everything that comes after that, the balbatish, you're lazy, you're empty, whatever, it's come from nowhere, right? And he's like, I'm realizing more and more that the questions that I have and the thoughts that I have today are also valid, and in a way more valid. And it broke me. It broke me because I, not so much personally. I think we all kind of have to go through some kind of development, and not all of it is easy. A lot of it is painful, but I'm not triggered personally by this kind of stuff. I've dealt with it. I'm dealing with it. I'm okay, I feel, in this regard. But I know that this is everywhere. This is everywhere. This is everywhere. This. It's a massive crisis that we're talking about here. Going from narrative to noticing, the way you're putting it, is leaves a lot of people in the lurch, in no man's land.
I'm very reticent to blame what is called the system.
Right. Well, the system doesn't exist.
Okay, great. I'm glad we could agree on that. Exactly.
What is a system?
But I'm hesitant to say, well, in Yeshiva they didn't teach me.
Right.
For the love of God, grow up.
Right.
No one owes you anything.
Right.
No one needs, whatever you were taught in Yeshiva was wonderful and valuable. Take your life and get control over it. Okay? Don't think your best years are in the past. Those are not your years. Those were, in a sense, what you were taught by everybody else, and that's why, in a sense, it's a certain escapism to going into that. Notice and confront what is going on in your life and work with it. Use the tools that you were given in Yeshiva. Use the tools from Chassidus, from davening, from learning, and the playground to work with it is Farbrengen. Not in the sense of,
but yeah, I understand. But what were the tools? What are those tools that you're referring to? I agree with you that sitting later on in life and fetching about Yeshiva doesn't help. Even if you're right, it doesn't help you. You at some point you have to own up to your challenge and figure it out. But I don't need to go back to the yeshivas. Let's just go with what you're saying about taking ownership.
Mm-hmm.
What are those tools? What are those tools? Because for a lot of people, what they see is a lot of nasa, a lot of narrative, a lot of this is what you got to do. It's all figured out. Just go and do it. Where do you find those tools retroactively? Where do you find them?
Those tools were given to you in a raw form, so you need to develop them. But the tools are, first of all, thinking. When you learn a Maimer Chassidus, what are you doing? You're thinking, essentially. It's not, especially Chabad Chassidus, as opposed to Chagat Chassidus. There's ideas that
are you suggesting that the goal of learning Maimer is not to finish it necessarily?
Unquestionably not. Unquestionably not. The point of a Maimer, the point of a Maimer is to learn it well. And here, I'll give you. Learn Maimer. When you learn a Maimer, when you learn 2 lines, ask yourself three questions. The first question ask yourself is, what dilemma is this line addressing?
Right. In my life.
No, not in your life. Not in your life. Don't go to your life yet. Okay.
Okay.
Not to your life. What dilemma is this line addressing? Okay. What solution is it offering? Okay. And what does that solution look like? Use those three tools, those three steps, and then see what emerges. And then I think you'll have an easier time applying it to your life, finding it. I could. Here's one way it could look. Here's another way I could apply it. Here's another way I could apply it. There's not one definitive way how to apply it.
Right.
But to understand that my martyrdom, the sichas, my martyrdom, are raw materials. And here's the thing. What country or what continent has the most gold located in Africa?
Africa.
What's the poorest continent?
Africa.
Okay. What are the richer countries? The United States, for instance. What does the United States have? The technology to extract the gold and make it useful.
Right.
As Chassidim, we have this huge continent of Chassidus. But if we are unable to extract it and apply it, then we are poor. And we should not convince, we're almost like the people in Africa who feel that they're the wealthiest because they're living on landmines, but in fact they're not.
Right.
And the extraction, I'll just at one point, the extraction doesn't occur in yeshiva. The extraction is meant to occur ad yoim maaseh.
Right.
Every single day of your life, you extract it, and it looks differently. There's a way you extract it in your 30s, there's a way you extract it in your 40s, in your 50s, in your 60s, in your 70s, in your 80s, and in your 90s.
That's the point of living.
Yes, and so the tool we have, for one, is chassidus. The ideas, the raw ideas. That's one. The second one, I mean, we have a Rebbe. We have a Rebbe. We have a role model and a coach and whatever you want that pushes us to be in a certain sense restless, to be present. I think it'd be interesting to do like a survey. What would you consider Rebbe's superpower? And everybody, there'll be different answers.
Right.
Well, one answer that what resonates to me, and that's why it took me a couple of years. It took me actually a long time to get a picture of the Rebbe hanging in my house.
Really?
Yeah.
Why?
I couldn't find one that
spoke to you.
Yeah.
You wanted a picture in your
I
house.
I wanted, but I couldn't. And people walk into our house and just see no picture there. There were no pictures at all. So it's not like there were a bunch of other pictures and there was no picture of the Rebbe. There just wasn't.
Okay. You're just a perfectionist, basically.
I try to be less of a bullshitter.
Okay.
And I don't want to picture the Rebbe because that's what you're supposed to do, and that's part of the narrative.
Right. So what did you end up doing?
Then I was once at a friend's house, and I saw one. I said, "Kazer Eir Kadesh." That's the one that speaks to me. And I got it, big one hanging in my house.
Which picture is it? Hard to describe.
Yeah,
it's a facial expression.
It's a facial expression. The Rebbe is speaking to somebody at a Farbrengen. Looks like in the Lamed, but the Rebbe is fully present. The Rebbe is connecting to that person. The Rebbe is listening. The Rebbe is
right.
So you have that. What I'm saying is we have a Rebbe. We have a role model. That's another tool we have. We have a Rebbe. We have a deep sense of mission and purpose.
Right.
That's another sense of purpose that we have that makes us realize that we have somewhere to go. We have something to do. We count. We're important. We have a role to play.
Right.
So these are all just a number of tools, and we have Avodas Tefillah. We have the Farbrengen. Avodas Tefillah is a Chabad institution.
It's a gold mine.
It's a gold mine. Farbrengen is a gold mine. It is. Farbrengen is an skill, or it's an experience that is developed uniquely within Chabad.
Right.
And it's present within Chabad, and it's a tool with which we are actually how we take the raw material,
right, and
extract it. The Farbrengen is the extractor, and then transform it into something that we could then apply in our lives.
So what happened to Farbrengen? Where did we go wrong? I mean, because you're laying. Maybe
you tell me where you think it went wrong.
No,
I haven't given that thought. Honestly,
you're much older than me, or older enough than me that it would be interesting to hear what happened before my days, I suppose. But we don't have to go necessarily into the negative. No, because what you're saying makes a lot of sense on paper, and also resonates with me, because for all my skepticism or cynicism, whatever you want to call it, look, I did wonderfully in Yeshiva. Yeah, I learned a ton. I enjoyed almost every minute. I didn't have the unholy breathing down my back because I was like a fish in water.
I get that impression looking at your library.
Okay, that's a little bit just.
There's a diversity of it. You
okay.
You could tell about a person when you walk into the house and you look at their library.
Yeah, okay. If it's not too manic, you're fair enough. No, I mean I loved learning. Like I said, I don't learn as much as I should or that I'd like to, but I loved learning back in the day, and both Chassidus and Yuvla, and I had a great time in Yeshiva, and I had some wonderful Farbrengens. So it resonates with me. I not to mention, and I've mentioned, I am mentioning, I loved davening when I was in Yeshiva. I loved it, and it wasn't. It started with Peretz and I. I remember Masifta. They taught us Peretz and I in Muncie, and that kind of that was certainly a spark. I was like, wow, this is you're young. You can go one direction and be just go all out in that direction, or you can be like, wow, this is beautiful. This is poetic. This takes me places, right?
Yes.
And I love davening, and as I got older in Yeshiva, I used to think Chassidus every day before davening. Sometimes a half hour, sometimes more, sometimes a little bit less. I could daven for an hour and a half. You know, I mean, chitzin, blitzes, all that stuff. I got thrown my way, and I probably deserved a big chunk of it. But
you were a kid.
Exactly.
You were a kid. You were doing a great job for a kid.
No,
Okay.
I'm sorry. No, but at the end of the day, it's good.
It's
to
part
have
of the
fun.
education.
It's good to have
that tension.
Look. When I was in 4th or 5th grade, I thumbed a mark that I got on some. I was in Australia, and I shoved some great mark that I got on my test into my friends or my classmates. I don't know how friends they were, and I ended up in a garbage can. and I remember to this day, I was in art class. I ended up in a garbage can, and you know what? I don't look back at that moment negatively. I think that was a good learning moment.
Sure.
I would be very sad if my kid did it to someone else, or if
it got done to them.
Well, yeah, exactly. But probably more sad if they did it to someone else. But at the end of the day, I don't think that kind of back and forth is a bad thing. I don't take it badly. But not only that, people today, that some of the people that don't like the podcast, they say, I remember that fool. He used to daven as a bacher and we used to make upon him, whatever. I'm just saying, it's around. But I to your point, I think it's a beautiful thing, and I believe that Lubavitch has beautiful tools. I guess so. On paper, it makes sense. In my own life experience, it makes sense. It's just what I don't want to escape into this world where it all makes sense, because in reality I know it's not working.
All right, so let's talk to that.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes. So let's talk to that. There are a couple of things that are working against this.
Okay.
That's what makes Chassidus and all this so novel, because there are forces against it.
Right.
Just to name a few. Hard work is hard. Change is hard, but also we get very content and comfortable with, use the word homeostasis.
Right.
It works.
Don't break it.
Don't break it. It's not even don't break it. It's serving a positive purpose.
Right.
We are awash with bullshit. Okay? Meaning to say that the truth and the hard work that is associated with it is not relevant. What's relevant is what purpose it serves me. We are awash with comparing and seeing how others, and we're learning through comparing and being told the way it's supposed to be, it should be.
Right.
So we are awash with forces that are undermining what we just spoke about Chassidus and Chabad and Rebbe and all of that.
Do you think we're also awash in Chassidus also? Do you think at some point the amount of narrative that we have, like the amount of mamarim that the bacher feels or the younger man feels he needs to cover just to make Pesach, he doesn't have to forget about paying the bills. I got to learn the Rebbe's go the 18 mamarim, 25 siches, and obviously what ends up happening when you have that kind of shopping list, you don't do any of it.
Right.
Any of it.
So maybe we could go back to yeshivas is that there's room and space for that type of learning, that type of just learning a lot as a bacher.
Right.
But then there is what we need to be teaching and taught is how to translate, how to extract from. We're given the lines of, all you need is one line of Chassidus to I'm sure you've heard that.
Yeah,
right?
Of course.
One line is enough.
Right.
A Farbrengen could just be sitting across from each other, but has it been taught? What is the pedagogy of taking one line and show me how to get from point A to point B, from the start to the finish?
Right.
So yes, in a certain sense, we are awash also in text. You walk into class, how many books do you own? And there is a certain, we have so much text that we've lost conversation.
Yeah.
We have so many stories that Farbrengens have become telling of stories, which I'm going to call them narrative outsourced.
Right.
Chazering a mimer, narrative outsourced. But here's something that these two offer that are very appealing. One is they're authentic.
Right.
One is they're authentic.
They're formal.
They're authentic. In other words, so nobody could accuse you
Right.
of being a fraud. So there's no fear.
Right.
You have no fear when there's no vulnerability. I don't like that word. I'll use it, but I'm going to use it here. In sharing that,
Right.
you are legitimate.
Right. This
Okay.
is what we do at a Fabring.
Okay.
Yeah.
So what you're sharing is legitimate. Right. The second thing about those two is that they are socially acceptable. They're socially everyone agrees as a group. The group think is that this is okay.
Right.
Okay. So we have so much of it, and it's safe.
Right.
Okay. Change is scary. It's not safe. So first of all, it is change, and noticing it. And avodah pnimis is personal. So there's question of is it authentic? Its authenticity can be questioned. You know that line? Who you?
Right. Oh, yeah.
Okay. There's things I can't say on the podcast.
That's
There's things I can't say on the podcast.
That's upstairs 770. That's upstairs 770
Okay.
after davening. You just heard a bunch of Russians shouting at each other. Who are you?
It's a load of losers.
Okay. Yes, I agree.
Okay.
Okay, but everybody kind of knew that.
Okay, fine. But here's the thing. But here's the point. If sharing something that is you're working on,
Right.
something that how you interpret
Right.
the mimer, how you apply it, how you experience it, what challenges you have, what stuckness you have. That doesn't feel authentic. That's you made up.
Right.
Okay? That is not socially group thinking. That's yours.
Right.
Okay?
Right.
So where's that done? And that's why there's less and less and less and less and less of it, because there's lack of courage,
Right.
and there's lack of humility. Humility and courage come to the humility
To make a mistake.
but humility also to respect and honor somebody else
Making a mistake.
making a mistake.
Right.
Having the courage to share it, and having the courage to not to think group,
Right.
and having the courage to explore and not have to be always in the safety of the narrative of the authentic. That is avodah pnimis. That is, I'm going to go, maybe we'll have a chance, is the calling of the Maimer Vata Tetzaveh, particularly the last part of it from Peretz and I, which is original Rebbe. The first two Aces are explanation of the first 8 are explanation of the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer.
Right.
And in the calling there, I'll just note it. The calling there is that the key word in the Maimer is the word avodah. I think it's the fundamental word, the key word in Yud and Tes, Yud and Yud Aleph, Yud and Aleph, yeah, is avodah. Is the sense that each and every one of us has our reality that we need to transform and get it aligned with our deepest inner being, or nefesh elokisha as the shmushis and the atmos, as opposed to doing it as a result of being instructed by others,
Right.
even if it's the Rebbe,
Right.
the Moshe Rabbeinu who's mamshich das bepnimis, even if it's by circumstances, when there's the gzeres and the chayshach, that isn't sufficient, because
Right.
those are external.
Right.
Even if it's the most authentic external, even if the external brings forward the best part in you, the mesiras nefesh,
Right.
you got to do it on your own,
Right.
and it's going to look uniquely yours.
Yeah.
Now, even though at the end, the Yud Beis, everybody points out, but you have to remember this is Vata Tetzaveh. The Nesinas Koyach comes from the Rebbe.
Right.
And you must do it. You be aware that that's how you're doing it, and we're using the tools that the Rebbe provided you, Chassidus provides you to do it.
Right. Yeah, look, I think it's fear. I think from everything you're saying, there's nothing that I feel a need to disagree with or that I disagree with. I agree with it. I think at the core of it is fear. I guess that's what you meant by saying that it's courage. It's a lack of courage. I think there is a tremendous fear. I don't think it's only fear of how am I going to look or how's my friend going to look at me. I think there's a fear of what's Lubavitch going to look like. what's the future like when Lubavitch can't answer questions of, or when it's hard. You talk about how we spoke about earlier about how back in the 90s the idea of the Rebbe passing away was just unthinkable, right? It wasn't non-existent. The conversation of Lubavitch in 30 years in the flip side is also non-existent in our minds. Nobody talks about it. It's just it's all on it's all on autopilot.
30 years from now, 30 years
30 years from now.
30 years from now.
It's all on autopilot. Yeah, you can't talk about that. Don't talk about that. That's off limits. It's not even off, in a way that maybe this conversation is more about being off limits as opposed to non-existent, but it's effectively non-existent. It's not discussed. It's you see this kind of interesting flip where Mashiach has to come to Mashiach doesn't have to come. We'll still be here. It's incoherent, and that's out of fear, right? That's out of fear. What does it look like? And it boils down again and again to you need to have the courage. But people think the courage is I need the courage to do the right thing. No, you need the courage to possibly make a mistake. That's the whole point. If you know what you're doing is right, you don't. I mean, I guess there are times where you need courage because you need courage. I mean, if Avram Avinu knew for a fact, an absolute fact, that if he jumps into the fire, he's going to be saved, is that an Nisayan? I don't think so. It's not an Nisayan.
No.
Right? That's the whole point. He believes that he doesn't even
know. He knows that fire burns.
Right, and he knows that he's doing it for the right reason, but he has no idea or he doesn't know for a fact what the outcome's going to be. That's why it's a Nisayan, right? So even though he's doing the right thing, yeah, I mean, like, even the Rebbeim spoke this way. That's why even the Rebbeim spoke this way. They didn't claim to. I was reading in the Akdam of Kuntres Mind, which for who knows how many times I've said is a just glorious thing to read on every level. Certainly at this age for me, and I think for others as well. The Akdam has nothing to do with Kuntres. You've read it?
A year or two, I opened it up and I started reading it. Please remind me.
It's mind blowing. I want to at some point when I have the time, I want to just translate it to English because for whatever reason it's not in the English translation. But it's a Yuman of the Frierdiker Rebbe.
Oh yeah, yes.
Oh, it's
extraordinary. Yes.
It's one explosion after another.
Yes.
And one of the things, and you want to talk about Fabring, and I will tell you something that says in Fabring. I'll even get the Sefer and read it word for word. But what was I going to say? No, I know, but there was something I wanted to
about the Rabbeim.
The Rebbe Rashab was under tremendous pressure from I think they were called Chama, Chevra Mefitzei Haskala, and they opened up a branch in Lubavitch, and they were mastering on Lubavitch. The authorities actually shut down the yeshiva for a few days, and it was a whole geschäft.
They came to ask the Frierdiker Rebbe for documents.
Right, and then they shut down the yeshiva eventually, and then the Frierdiker Rebbe instructed them not to break the seal on the front door, but to go through the window. So a whole geschäft, and they got into trouble for that. It was a whole thing. And the Rebbe Rashab, I don't remember if he went to the tzin or he instructed the Frierdiker Rebbe to go to the tzin of their Marash and Tzemach Tzedek. And first, he was bemoaning how he doesn't stand up to his father and his grandfather, but there was this kifus on one hand. The Rebbe Rashab, I think, wrote back or said, I forget. I really should know the details better, but because they were threatening him that if you don't follow these orders, we're going to send you out of Lubavitch. And he said, okay, I'm going to make a stand based on what I believe. You're going to do what you're going to have to do, and let the dust settle where it may. But it wasn't like, I know exactly how this is going to pan out. Yeah. It's like, I know what I need to do, and I'm going to do it. That's courage. What we've turned into is we know how it's going to end, and courage is getting to the finish line. No, I'm sorry, that's not courage. And that's when you end up having this kind of static line, the static condition where everyone is kind of in this holding pattern, scared, like, if I budge, I may not.
Yeah. It's everyone fitting in, everyone being the same, everyone not wanting to not appreciating the fact that you have a particular unique mission and you got to be different and you have to figure it out for yourself and work it for yourself and not know what the outcome is going to look like. That's what Aveda Pnimis is, and there's no and you can't display it to the world. It's got to be internally, work internally.
I want to find the Kuntres of Mind.
So I actually, now you reminded me, when I was reading the Akdama, there were certain lines over there that were so striking to me that I actually took pictures of it, just to.
So do you have the picture of the Fabrengen? Do you know the?
I don't remember.
Let me get it for you.
I don't remember which section. Oh,
I should have prepared this earlier. I had to break up a conversation, but I've been itching to share these lines on the podcast, but I never had the reason to. So basically, the whole Rishima starts off with the famous Yutis Kislev that the Rebbe Rashab was out of town.
Yes.
And
the letter that gave us is
Rosh Hashanah. So that letter took some time until it was transcribed, or maybe authorized and then transcribed and sent to different Lubavitch communities. It took some time for that to happen. And the feedback was very detailed how some of the cities were very mad and they wrote back to Lubavitch, it was like a whole geschäft. But there are a few cities where, because they received the Michtav in Shvat, they celebrated this for 2 days in the middle of Shvat. You remember this?
Yeah.
Okay. So, where is it? I'm sorry for the delay. I can edit it out anyway.
I'm actually looking over some of the sections there.
Oh, here we go. Okay.
What page is it?
Page 25.
I'm just wondering if that's one of the pages I marked off.
I don't.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So they got a letter from the Fidik Rebbe is writing that he got a response from Peterburg that on Monday of the previous week, which was Yud Shvat, Benzin Otovetsky came to Peterburg from a place called Bryansk for business. And we have to paint a picture here a little bit, that in this Hakdama, the Fidik Rebbe describes a lot there was two Lubavitch worlds at the time. There was really two worlds in the whole. There was the majority of Frum Jews at the time in Russia lived in what's called the Pale settlement. They weren't allowed into Moscow or Petersburg. Even the Fidik Rebbe had a hard time going there. You needed a special visa to stay overnight in those large cities. And there were a few wealthy Jews well-off Jews who managed to live in those cities, including a few Chassidim. So there's this kind of world where Lubavitch is split in some ways between the backwaters, physically speaking, of Pale Settlement and Lubavitch, and the few that live in the big city. Think of it, the few Lubavitchers that live in New York City in the 1960s, if that even existed. Okay, so Rabbi Tovetsky comes from Bryansk for business, and he visits his relative, I don't know if it's his brother or his cousin, Rav Yaakov Tovetsky, about Yutis Kislev. Now listen to the Fidik Rebbe describes Yaakov Tovetsky. Yaakov or Otievsky. I don't know. I say Otievsky. Avshu ish chavshi kiyadua, even though he was a well-known free man, which we mean a frayid. Okay, I'm pretty sure. He was awakened in him a nakuda and the memories of his childhood, and he told his relative Benzin that he should organize a Sudas Yom Tiv in his home at a time that's appropriate for the Chassidim, and they will bring food, because his home is in kosher. They'll bring food from the caterer of Rav Garfinkel. Okay, it could happen today. It feels so real, right? And on Thursday, on Tu B'Shvat, there was a Yom Tiv. This guy a Yom Tiv to Yutis Kislev Hasheni. On Tu B'Shvat, they had the second Yutis Kislev of that year, with a lot of simcha and a lot of fanfare. And there were a lot of Chassidim there, Chaim Messiah, I forget the name, Monazin, etc. And when Yaakov Otoyevsky was Chotev Lev, I guess a little bit inebriated, and with Eseres Gdela, he swore that from that moment on, his house will be kosher, and he'll keep Shabbos. And the next day, in fact, he destroyed his dishes, and he bought new dishes. And that Shabbos, which was Shabbos Shira, it was the first Shabbos in 19 years that he closed his office. That's a beautiful story. But listen to the Frierdiker Rebbe says, Boy, come and see. Kama godel keicha shel svadas chassidim. How powerful is a farbrengen of chassidim? When they awaken with tremendous awakening to the words of the Rebbe, they can awaken to tshuva someone who is 19 years eating trefus and mechal Shabbos. And this is a punchline. Underlined. Chassidim underestimate their spiritual abilities. It's gold, man. Chills just reading it. And didn't you learn in Yeshiva that what a chassidische Verbringen afil malach machal kan done? It's a beautiful line. I'm not disputing it. It's different. It's a different line, right? It's a different line because I remember in Yeshiva that line of malach machal, what the cynical kind of retort to that was like what a chassidische Verbringen knuftan afil malach mavis kan done.
I've seen that too.
And that's because when you situate yourself only in Malach Michal is an angel. We're not angels.
Abstract.
We're not angels. So it's true on some level, but what this line does is it puts it all in the Chassidim. It's not that when you sit by a farbrengen and something happens in heaven that that's above you. No. What you're able to affect by being real and by letting loose what's real inside of you.
The resources, what he's saying, the resources we have within ourselves are enormous.
Yes.
But I go back to the point I made earlier. Raw resources can be meaningless, are meaningless.
No, it's a beautiful vart. The vart, gold in the ground doesn't pay your bills.
In fact, it can make you quite poor because you think, and maybe that's a point, you think you have enormous resources.
Right.
So you don't do anything else.
Right.
You're left poor.
Right.
Because you're not creative, you're not industrious.
Right.
Because, ich bin a chassid, ich bin der Rebbe ist ein Mensch.
Yeah, and I yarshin the piece of land, and I'm gezer, so I have a piece of land that has all kinds of nechasim in it. Yeah.
Exactly. I have a title, I could go back so far, and in the meantime, you just a behemoth grabjung.
Yeah, it's a very. I didn't expect the conversation to be so hopeful and optimistic. I'm glad it is. I'm glad it is. If nothing else to prove to people that I'm not looking for the suck, But no, it's inspired. It's inspired. It's real stuff. There's real stuff here.
So I want to tell you that this real stuff that this is not only coming from theory.
Right.
I'm not theorying on it. I'm actually working on it.
Right.
I'm actually doing work on it. This is something that we're going back to our shlichus, in something that we started with alumni, and a project that we started with alumni, trying to go into deeper understanding and learning about their lives and bringing change into their lives.
Right.
And then Bashgacha Pratis, which is a story unto itself, it shifted to shluchos. When my wife Chanie started exploring conversations with shluchos about life on shluchos.
Right.
And then it evolved to work that we're doing with shluchim and shluchos, and essentially aveda pnimis.
Finding the tools,
finding the practice of aveda pnimis. So we've been, for the past 2-3 years, we've been thinking about this and trying to figure out and not figuring out methods of how do you practice Aveda Pnimis? What is the pedagogy of Aveda Pnimis? So this led me also to thinking about Verbringens.
Right.
And you know, and the beauty about shlichus is the fact that you're outward facing.
Right.
So when you're outward facing, when you're working with people who are, you can't just throw out words like, what are you talking about? You want to bring something, you have to think it through. You have to articulate it. You have to make it relevant. You can't really fake it.
Right.
So it brought us to me thinking about Verbringens. So I created this pedagogy of Verbringen. And then how do you practice Verbringen? Can we? And the answer is we absolutely can. It evolved into a game.
Right.
That just to help people practice Verbringen, but also with Aveda Pnimis. What are the steps necessary to practice Aveda Pnimis? Right? You heard the word Aveda Pnimis before?
Of course I heard it.
Okay. What images do you have when you hear the word Aveda Pnimis? What pictures? What words come to mind?
I mean, what did I think of just now? I thought of older Chassidim davening b'Aveda.
Yeah.
Right. That's what you expected to hear from me.
Yeah. I mean, from you and I think from others too.
Yeah.
Okay. So what that when you say that, you're basically making a couple of claims that it's someone else, somewhere else,
Right.
old,
Right.
irrelevant,
Right.
abstract.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Right. Okay. But it also makes another statement. It's authentic
Right.
when it looks like that.
Right. If Zalman Kleiman could paint it, then it would be real.
Exactly.
But Zalman Kleiman would never paint me, so that's what you're saying.
So, and what it's also making a claim is that the ideal chassid looks like that. Doesn't look like a guy living in Philly or in Boston.
Right.
In 2024.
Right.
Okay. That's mostly because when you think of it, when you hear the word Aveda Pnimis, you don't think of a methodology.
Right.
Like, what do I actually do?
Right.
So, what we're doing is helping create a methodology with which we happen to be working with shluchim and shluchas because Hashgacha Pratis brought it here, but it's relevant to everybody. In fact, it's something that we're also bringing to students.
Right.
What is a methodology of change and growth, which is in a sense Aveda? How is it done? Now, how is it done in a way that your version doesn't look like my version?
Right.
Not in that way. In a way where your version is uniquely yours. And what we're discovering is phenomenal. It's phenomenal.
I'd be interested to hear about it. And your wife is here. She came to Philadelphia with you as well, so I guess we're on the conversation for the rest of it.
Yeah.
I'll hear from both of you, but we'll hear from both of you on the other side of this.
Yes.
I thank you. Alrighty, so we are back here with Rabbi Peretz and Chanie Chein. Yes, I got it right. And what we were discussing earlier was that the Yeshiva gives us a narrative. The Yeshiva has immense resources and gives you immense resources to pull from later on in life. But the gold in the ground doesn't pay the bills. And you need tools to extract the value and make it something that actually helps you. And that you and your wife both of you have created a program or have seen firsthand how this translates into the lives of other shluchim around you. Did I get it right?
You said it very well.
Wonderful. Thank you. So thank you for both being here. I already thank Peretz.
Sure.
No,
Thanks for
no,
having
thank him
us.
for sticking around, and thank you for coming. I'm trying to think where to start. We don't want to start all over again, but I guess just to introduce you into the conversation, how do you see it? Obviously, the experience of a Chabad girl, you were once a girl, Chabad woman, is very different in the sense you don't go to yeshivas. A lot of the chatter and a lot of the kvetching has to do with yeshivas. But like this map that Peretz laid out of narrative versus noticing, resources versus value. How do you see it? Is that something that women struggle with, feeling that there's something that made sense to them when they were in school, but when they get married, feels completely useless. What's it fun?
Parts of what you're saying resonate. We don't go to yeshiva. There's, it's not as immersive and holistic, and most of us also learn general studies.
Right.
So, but at the same time, we grew up with a deep call to do something worthy and reach. In my case, for shluchos, it was shluchos or bust.
Right.
But I didn't have the same. It didn't feel burdensome to me, but very, very aspirational. Also, motherhood and being a wife had that same calling. And we reached for it and we went for it, and at young ages. But when the reality of being a wife and a mother hits, I think there's an element there that just leaves you breathless and you're unprepared for. That's not to say not to get married young, so I'm not going there. But there is something that is so overwhelming and nonstop in raising a child and caring for a home and a family that a woman can feel like she's putting herself in a different space while she's giving and creating. And then when you add shluchos to that, it just doubles that feeling of being a wife and a mother, which is a treasure and a calling and a manifesting a dream, but at the same time, so there are parts of us that we may put aside.
I guess my question would be, is that a Chabad challenge? Is that a Chassidus challenge? Or is it like any woman today that, let's say, wants to have both a career, because she was educated that women should aspire to a career, but also wants to be a mother? Is it like, what are we pointing just at what I think? I have 3 daughters, thank God, and it's something I'm concerned about. The impossible is asked of women today, to be both. Is that what we're talking about, or is it more or is there something along the lines of what Peretz was discussing earlier, which is the idealism breaks, the narrative shatters, and you're left with broken pieces?
Is that how you said it?
Those are his words, but it's aligned.
Creative license. Yeah. It's my podcast.
Sure.
Yes. There's the realism sets in when you're right in that when a woman wants to develop a career and be a mother, we do give up certain things in each of those spheres. But shluchos, the narrative we were given of shluchos is that we're here to bring Mashiach, and we're looking for any opportunity to make a difference and impact someone. And so this never-ending hunger to give is so relentless that it starts to break down when a woman feels that her voice is not part of the design, and any other woman could come in and do what she's doing. And so what we're noticing is that women are trying to...
One second. What do you mean by that? What did you mean by that?
Where it doesn't matter if it's Chanie Chein at Chabad or Brandeis University, any shlucha could be doing what I'm doing, where my shluchus is not reflecting the unique person and woman that I am. So
why is that a woman thing? A man could say the same thing. Is that like, you're a mother? Why am I giving away from my being a mother to do something that anybody else could do, or just the general feeling of being a cog in the machine?
I wouldn't put it as a cog in the machine, but in the never-ending giving mode.
I see.
I don't know if men have it in the same way, where it's
What do you think?
the giving, the narrative, and then we're supposed to, like, even the story of I don't know the details, but on Yom Kippur and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the way we daven is by taking care of our children. It's a famous story, and forgive me, I don't remember the details. The Rebbe might have said it to someone. So those are, let's say, in the...
I also don't know the details.
Okay.
That makes you feel better.
So like we women are given to us like a reminder. We'll even get it today in 2024 in our WhatsApp groups. Reminder, the way we daven and the way we serve Hashem is by taking care of our children and our community.
Right.
And so that narrative is a gift, but at some point some of us want to outgrow that gift and actually, for example, want to daven.
Right.
And want to find other ways out of the giving mode and how to develop our own relationship with Hashem, our own, renew our iskashos to the Rebbe, figure things out independent of being a mother. That's where the pieces start to kind of show up.
Interesting. You're saying that in the beginning, in a way, the female experience or what the woman learns, what the girl learns, is also, I think, what goes together with what you're saying, like that kind of idea that women have it more intuitively. Men need minyanim to keep them in check, right? Men need, right? I'm sure you've heard this.
Sure.
Men need the mitzvahs because they need structure. Women have it intuitively, and in a way that and I guess there's a truth to that. There's for sure a basis to it, but I think what you're saying is that it works until it doesn't work. It feels good. It's very atmospheric, but it's lacking kind of hard substance that you can chew on.
At some point, and women feel it in different ways. I might want to go to shul.
Right.
Not every woman wants to go to shul.
Right.
So that some of the narratives that we've been gifted and given or prescribed, we start to outgrow, and we don't know what to do with it. Am I not a worthy woman? Am I not a righteous woman who's about to, greet Mashiach like the women in Mitzrayim? Exactly.
Right. So we were worried earlier that we were a little bit too optimistic here, which is a terrible, terrible thing. But no.
No,
I'm kidding. No, but kind of kidding. But let's talk a little bit, because also we have limited time. This isn't just the two of you living in your own minds, and wouldn't it be wonderful if we could have a little bit more tools and a little bit more, there's an urgency to what you're doing because of things that you're seeing. So talk a little bit, what is the crisis? Because I'm obviously forcing the issue here a little bit, but you mentioned to me earlier on the phone, what is the crisis that you're seeing in marriages specifically that results from this, both the husband and wife, both in their own way, realizing, wait a second, where do I go from here?
Well, the first thing is what Chanie referenced, is we come into shlichus from a very different education. A man comes into shlichus in Yeshiva,
right,
where he's been given all we spoke about earlier, and the woman comes into shlichus with something else,
right,
and then they get married, and then they play different roles.
right.
The shliach plays one role, a more front-facing role, a more where he puts his personality forward. He is the face, he is the voice, he is the leader.
Right.
And the woman is playing another role.
Right.
I just want to, you're generalizing,
I am.
and that's fine. It's important to generalize.
Yeah.
It's not as kind of, it's not that like you're the front role and we're the supportive role. I mean, one of the frontiers is that it's a shliach and a shlucha.
Sure.
But what Peretz is saying is a truth in that, for example, the sheer amount of knowledge that he had, that he was able to bring as a teacher on shlichus, was incomparable to mine, and I was your model Beis Rivka student.
Right.
The personality. I mean, a giving role does demand that there's a lot of behind the scenes taking place more than in the front. So that's where women intuitively and naturally are gifted, and we do it. What more than one shlucha has described is that the mission has become so, it's defining their relationship. So we go in, we're really young, and then you're building a company, and you may even have noted your relationship is secondary to the mission. And so you really are hungry to have an impact on your community and grow it, but the relationship can suffer. Sometimes it's enhanced when you work on a mission together, but only if you're unafraid of going into the conversations that demand that you talk about your relationship. So Shlucha described it as, it's a cliche, but it's true for her and it rang true for others. It's like we're two ships passing through the night. We're each really doing what we want to do on Shluchos, but he's doing his thing, I'm doing my thing. And even when we meet and talk about Shluchos, we're not talking about us, independent of Shluchos. And so that's where we're seeing a disconnect.
Yeah, look, I think I'm pushing back in a way just to kind of be fair, but also just to refine it. I'm not at all hostile to what you're saying. I agree fundamentally, and it makes sense to me, and I've also seen it in conversations. But this idea of two ships crossing each other at sea. I'm not on shluchos anymore. My wife sometimes complains the same thing to me. She'll hate that I even mentioned it, but I mean, it's everybody complains about it. So what makes shluchos different? What I've always sensed is that, in many ways, when you are not on shluchos, you cannot. What can you blame it on? What can I blame it on? If my wife says you're not available, like you're not emotionally available, I want to make a few more bucks. Sorry, too bad. That's not a good answer. At the very least, I have to give that answer, and then I have to justify it. And sometimes I can justify it, and sometimes no, you're just being a schmuck. Period. End of story, right? Whereas with shluchos, I feel that's to me the difference. I'm not available because I'm a shluchos. What do you want from me? I'm doing the right thing.
Nice.
You're sanctifying your flaws.
Correct.
And sanctified flaws can never be repaired or addressed.
Correct.
And the consequences of those flaws metastasize.
Right.
They grow.
Right. You sometimes say it like, the way you use the Rebbe. What's your term?
Weaponizing?
Yeah.
Rebbe?
Like.
You're on the right podcast.
No, I mean, we can't do that. So no, that's a good insight you're saying. So therefore, they don't talk about it with their spouses, because then it means that we talk about values.
Right.
And what value is my marriage when we have a supposedly greater value of shluchos?
Right. It's also, this has been something that I've also noticed when it comes to the conversation of raising kids on shluchos, and there's a very justified discussion, especially children my age growing up on shluchos, where parents in those days in general were less attuned to like spending time with your kids. It was a more old-fashioned world, let's say, right? And people, a lot of times people's response will be, well, if your father was a lawyer, he also would have been less available, right? Just to make clear, I get along splendid with my father. Okay.
It's on the record.
No, it's on the record, and I will have a podcast. I will describe my relationship to my father at a later point. But I don't feel resentment towards him. I just want to be clear. But there, of course, is a discussion that includes my father, includes my childhood, where like, could your father have been more available? And a lot of times you're like, oh, that would be anywhere. That's not just a shluchos thing. And it's like, no. If my father was a lawyer, then at some point, either myself or my mother, either then or now, would go and say, hey, you put your money and your career ahead of me. Bye. Have a nice day. You're a schmuck. Right? You weren't there.
There's accountability.
Like, right. Exactly. There's accountability, right? And the person has to account for it. Now, sometimes the father says, look, you don't understand. I was working hard to put bread on the table. Okay, you wanted me to come to your soccer game. You wouldn't have had food. And as an adult, hopefully you can understand that. But you at least have to give an answer. Whereas on shluchos, it's hard because you could just easily fall into where like, I was doing the Rebbe's kavanah. You don't subscribe to shluchos. You don't believe it's the most important thing in the world. And it's like, well. So I'm wondering if that's a little bit the extra dynamic here.
Yes.
For sure. You said it well. That fear prevents people from even talking about it. But what we're seeing over 2 years is that it does quite the opposite. When we talk about and we go into places where we're too afraid to go to, it's a gift to explore things that have to be explored, because then the breakage will appear in other ways. And you have a choice now. And you can revitalize a marriage. You can revitalize shluchos. And that's what the shluchim and shluchos are doing.
Yeah, I think it's also important to add, there's a growing debate now. It's been one-sided for a while, but there's a growing debate now about, has the therapy culture, has it gone too far, right? And a book came out, a bit controversial, Bad Therapy by Abigail Schreier. I'm not asking for
Reviews.
I don't have any professional comments about therapy, and I'm not expecting or putting you on the spot about it. But what resonated with me, or what made sense to me, was what she was writing about is that some other experts in the field who are less well known and have less clout because of whatever reasons, they say that, like, when you go looking for problems, it's not necessarily the best thing to start off the day, asking kids in public school, like they do in many public schools, have you thought about suicide today, is not a wonderful way to start your morning. Rabbi Steinsaltz, aside.
You share that story? It's a good one.
Yeah, but Rabbi Steinsaltz is from a different world,
Exactly.
and he was a wise enough man to know in a second if you could handle it.
He was pushing me to change.
Yes, I know. I'm saying Rabbi Steinsaltz that's not what we're talking about, right? And he also knew who he was talking to. He must have sensed that, okay, you can handle that kind of clop, right? But like that example of, like, starting off public school, impressionable kids with, do you want to quit? Well, now that you mention it, I'm really feeling yucky. Does that mean I want to quit suicide? You go down right? So I only bring that up because a lot of times people will go, like, and you even mentioned it earlier, so why go there? Like, why bring up this? Why look through the closet for skeletons? If you don't know about the skeletons, let them be. And you know what? I agree. If you don't know about the skeletons, let them be. The problem is that very often we're talking about skeletons that you know about. Right?
Skeletons that are dancing.
right.
Banging on the closet door.
Right. The question, like,
we're not. Yes, we're not. We're not therapists,
right?
And we're not dealing with the things that cause the roots of illnesses, the things that cause situations where it require a more severe response. But what we have noticed is that the participants are saying it's therapeutic, in that not everything needs therapy.
Right.
We can just normalize certain skeletons.
Right.
When we choose a life of shluchos, we are going to be giving up certain things. We are going to be in the mode of giving. Okay, what does that look like? And what does that look like when I'm 21 versus when I'm 41?
Right.
So just to normalize things or normalize them before they become skeletons. Right. That's what I think is essential in Chabad and in the world. It's okay to, and there's ways to have conversations that are just fine. Right. And that's the idea of finding a voice and a language.
And what Chanie's describing here is what we spoke about earlier, noticing. Right. This is what noticing looks like. Right. And this is sort of the first important step in Avodah, in change, is to be able to notice, give language. When you give language, you're able to handle it. You get a handle on it, not handle it. Get a handle on it.
So notice what here? Notice that you're not feeling 100% aligned. What would be the noticing in this example?
Noticing that in my 23rd year of shluchos, I am not excited about making a menu at all for, my 7,000th Shabbos dinner.
And paying attention to it.
Yeah. So
not ignoring it.
Right. And some listeners might say, okay, duh, Chanie, so then hire a chef or get over it. Right. But we're talking about no one else telling me what I need to do. I'm noticing my feelings of disconnect or resentment. Right. Okay, now what do I want to do about it? And where is that coming from? Is it the menu or is it the shopping list associated with? Is it because I'm procrastinating it and so I'm doing it in a rush? Like what's going on? Right. And it's those kinds of noticing. And what we're noticing is that women in general, they're noticing.
The women notice more.
But they don't necessarily know what to do with what they're noticing and seeing.
So they have intuition that something's off.
Yes, and they're not necessarily sure they want to share it.
Why?
it's a fair question. I don't think I have the answer. Why? Because there's
judgmental. They
feel they might be judged. Either they might feel they're judging themselves, or their husbands will judge them, or their women colleagues, shluchos, will judge them. Someone, if I say to someone, I can't stand making the menu, you know what a shlucha typically would tell me now if I was just speaking? Oh my God, I can't believe you're still making the menu after 23 years. You don't have staff.
Right. That's not the point.
That's not the point. You missed what I'm trying to say.
Yeah.
So
I used to love doing it, and I don't love doing it anymore. What happened?
Right.
That's a point.
Right. Right.
And
What
that's
happened to
that's
that
a
love?
Point, and that's a point for
It's
her to figure out.
It's a really good question. What happened to the love that I had with my students when I moved out?
Right.
Or was that love? What was that?
Right. Yeah. I mean,
Right.
if you're married and you get annoyed about making dinner for your family, the issue is not the potatoes or the stupid oven, right? That's not the issue. The issue is something else. You probably need a break. You probably feel overwhelmed, whatever the case is. But I feel like, just to kind of broaden this issue and also tie it back to our earlier conversation, I know that the two of you are on shluchos and you interact mostly with shluchim in this program that you're involved in, but I don't believe, we discussed the particularities of shluchos, but I don't believe this is specifically a shluchos issue. I think this is like if we were talking about the Lubavitch issue, it would apply even if you're not on shluchos. Shluchos just adds more stress on it and probably accelerates it and adds that extra layer of sanctifying it, right?
Unquestioned.
You're right, 100%. We sensed this early on.
And
And you're right.
This emerged from the work we were doing with our alumni.
This
initially started with work we're doing with our alumni.
who are not even Lubavitchers.
No, just students who graduated, who are now middle life. So we started working with them, and then it segued into shluchos,
Right.
and then we realized there's a crisis here,
Right.
and we start Chalti Salim,
Right.
and if shluchim and shluchos want to bring change to the world,
Right.
we need to help them
Right.
bring change and access the resources of Chassidus, access the resources of Aveda and Aveda Pnimis. But unquestionably, this is universal. And I'll just add another point, is that, in the world of outreach, in the world of bringing people closer to Yiddishkeit, the Aveda Pnimis is a unique skill set that is our competitive advantage as Chabad Shluchim and Shluchos.
Right.
And we can bring that to the world and teach that
Right.
to students, to young adults, and thereby help transform their lives and bring them closer to Torah and mitzvahs.
So
Not as a salesman, but as an educator.
So you're really, or as an example, like what you're really arguing for here is that the whole kind of the dichotomy that's been created for whatever reason of Aveda Pnimis versus Shluchos, where like once upon a time we did Aveda Pnimis and then we put that to the side for Afatza. You're saying that that's nonsense.
Nonsense should be nonsense.
Okay.
Nonsense should be nonsense.
But you're not advocating to go back, like we discussed earlier, to the Zalman Kleiman paintings of Tashkent.
No. Because Aveda Pnimis, there's the Tafresh Pei Zayin version,
Right.
the Tafresh Lamed Gimel version, and there's this
Tafshin Lamed Gimel version.
Tafshin Lamed Gimel. There's a Tafshin Pei Dal version, and this perhaps goes to so he said, we're 30 years after Gimel Tammuz. It's not a mistake.
Right.
We're not living a mistake. We're not trying to recreate the past. We have a mission to make the present look special, make the present look unique.
Right.
And we have to make Aveda Pnimis take on its Tafshin Pei Dal version, 2024 version. There's the Peretz Chein version in Boston.
Right.
There's the Benzi Afson version in Philly. And there's the Carol Dinberg version in Omaha, Nebraska.
Who's Carol Dinberg?
I just made up that name.
Kidding. Okay, I'm just being again. I mean, it's interesting. Like almost, I don't know if you said this earlier, but almost like Aveda Pnimis, I've always understood it, the translation of it, like the inner work, right? The work that happens on the inside. But the way you're describing it almost is the work to get to the inside, right? They're like you cannot get to one without the other, right? Like we assume that there's this interior that's just active. No, it has to be activated. It has to be trained, right? You're a runner. Anybody that follows my statuses knows I lift, and that's part of the thrill, right? Is that you learn that your body can do something, but it needs to be trained, right? You can do awesome things, and you're suggesting the same thing.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
To become aware of our inner, to become sensitive to it, just start giving it voice. I know we might have used language that seemed exterior more in the beginning, but it's the same skills of paying attention to it. And you see it, sometimes you meet someone and you just want to be around them a little bit longer. Their eyes sparkle. What they're teaching or writing about or what their skill is just, they're breathing it. So imagine if shluchim and shluchis, I know people say we have charm and we're amazing and we have a presence, but there's so much more we could be
Right.
because I know we're good at presenting ourselves that way, but imagine we just woke up with a kind of sparkle where there's I use twinkle in the eye, where there's a smile, there's a curiosity, there's a playfulness.
Yeah, I mean that's always been something where we get too carried away with how other people appreciate us, and it's not just shluchim. It's also Lubavitchers. Like people say, that's wonderful. Lubavitchers have energy. God bless us, right? But we also know that when we're in a room together with each other, and right, we resort to the deepest, stupidest kinds of cynicism, and it's a yucky place, and very often. Like you'll see, like everybody just wants to get out. There's that famous line from Mendel Futterfass, which he was my great great uncle, and apparently he was a great man. People I know, there are people that I love that loved him, but there's a line that's attributed to him that like Chassidim are like manure, right? That spread across the field they fertilize, but in a pile they stink to high heavens. I think that's terrible.
It's terrible.
I think that's terrible. Like who wants to live like
Have you heard that before?
He's heard it before.
Not even mental. I don't remember, but I've heard this idea. Yes,
he's heard it before. It's Lubavitch cynicism 101, or like the fact that Joe Schmo likes me is going to somehow trump the fact that I can't get along with my own friends, or in your case, my own spouse, right? I mean, in a way, that's the most devastating thing, right? When you're talking about shluchas, like the crowd loves my parents or loves my spouse, but how is he or she in private?
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
I mean, that's what you're talking about here.
Yeah.
That's what you're talking about here. Because when you're so exterior facing, you're like, oh, well, it works outside, so I'm done. No.
The exterior facing way of living is easier than our homes are a kind of pneumius that no one else sees, and it's much harder.
And that's another point that shluchim and shluchas contend with, where most people don't. We're very frontal facing.
Right.
We live our lives projecting, marketing, good stuff, Yiddishkeit.
Right.
But so when
our homes, right? The number one thing is your shluchas is your home,
and you're on display, and you're displaying. There's a second side to that coin.
Right.
And if you are exclusively that, and which you are trained to be that, and that's what pays your bills, there's something that is being neglected. And what we're helping people do is go back inside and work on that inside, because that will affect what you're doing on the outside.
And when you go and from your work, when these couples go back inside, I know you mentioned to me on the phone that a lot of times only one side of the couple.
Most of the times, regrettably.
Right, but does it? What is the result when people start talking with their own words? What happens then? Does chaos ensue?
No. Clarity ensues.
It's hard to describe it. There's a certain description, like you just see, you see it's in the body, it's in the eyes.
I'll give an example of one particular shliach who said that as a result of the work that he's doing, the Saved opinions that he's doing, when he's in a public space, he is far more at ease and comfortable with himself, and doesn't have the anxiety or the need to. Like he said, he was at an event that there were a lot of people, a very high-end event. There were other shluchim there, and there was another shluch who he said was acting like a clown,
right?
And felt the need to perform,
right?
And he was very comfortable being quiet and playing, just being present, without needing to perform, and that was liberating for him.
Yeah, I mean, that goes back to the conversation about narratives that we had. Narratives and roles are very similar in that regard, right? Like, are you a person or are you filling a role, right?
Right.
Like, am I filming a true story, or am I creating a character out of my mind that you're basically acting? And I mean, that's for sure the idea of pnimis, right?
Yeah.
Like, you only find yourself on the inside. You find yourself on the inside. I mean, look, to be honest, this has been as I've said a few times already, despite myself, it's been a very hopeful, conversation, which is always nice. And I think the reason it's hopeful is because I do believe in a way this is the only way forward. In many ways, this is the premise of the podcast. Not to toot my own horn,
Yeah.
but
Toot your own horn.
Yeah.
okay, God bless. But I'm saying the premise of the podcast was there is a massive problem of misunderstanding and loneliness. Hi, can you go upstairs? I'll have to answer shortly, but there's a massive misunderstanding and crisis of loneliness and isolation and narrative overload, and the only way I could make my way through it was through having conversations with people. And that's not a be all end all, of course, right? A podcast is just a podcast. Conversations are just conversations. But forcing yourself to articulate yourself and listening to other people articulate themselves, which we have so forgot, like we have forgotten what it is. We're so immersed in technology. We have Shabbos, thank God, but we're so immersed in and so distracted that, like, the only way at least I've found a way to have a long, fulfilling conversation is basically say, okay, there's a camera now, there's a microphone, let's put on headphones and let's forget about the world. I don't even know what's been going on my phone the past 3 hours, and it's Wednesday.
Yeah.
It's Wednesday, but it's hopeful that it is a way through. It's not going to save everything, but it's a start.
Yes.
You're describing why a Farbrengen needs more than one person, and why the work we're doing is in a group. It's in a cohort.
So the organization, the project that we're doing is an organization we started called M54.
Okay.
Okay.
What's 54?
It's exactly
true.
what you just described. 54 is 3 times chai.
3 times high.
So the idea is when one person chai has a conversation with another person
All right.
that is authentic, that is
Present.
meaningful, present, meaningful, a third chayas emerges.
Right.
That is the magic of 54.
Right. Isn't that is a yom yom or something to that effect, right? L'chaim is 2 yuds, or yeah. I don't need to quote a source. It's a beautiful, the synergy. You're saying, but what you're saying, it's not just 2 coming together; it's creating a whole new thing.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because
Create a
each
whole
one
new
could
thing.
then also leave with something, an insight, a connection, a
Right.
clarity. So
Right.
while Avodah Pnimis is also demands individual work,
Right.
it's nourished and fed tremendously,
Yes.
and it needs relational engagement.
Right.
There's another word for it, the achtos of chassidim.
After
This is what it looks like.
No, look, it's a beautiful. When I have to say, it has been one of the most precious gifts that I have received, has been speaking to people. We're meeting for the first time today. Pretty much everybody that I've met in the course of this podcast has been people that I met for the first time, and being able to sit with them, and it's been a tremendous gift because. You sit down with someone that you don't know, and after 2 hours, you feel like you've known them your whole life. So that sounds like a big cliche, and it is. But when I thought about it, it's that you realize there is a realization on both ends that despite the age gap, despite the gender gap, despite all the gaps, we're on this journey together. We're on this ship together, right? And so on some level, we do care about each other. We're not in it on our own, and you affect me and I affect you, and there's something that we share about it, not to mention, there's always some distant relation, whatever, but there's something real there, right? We all come from somewhere, we're all going somewhere together, and it's the most nourishing, it's the most beautiful gift, I have. I mean, one of. Thank God I must make the typical disclaimer, besides my wife and kids. But you know what I'm saying.
Of course.
You know what I'm saying. And a lot of other people in my life that I have to be thankful for, and a lot of other things. But it's been such a beautiful, beautiful gift. And yes, I mean, I think it is the way forward. It is a way forward. It's a way forward, like you're describing, in marriages. It's a way forward in a community. It's a way forward in general. I mean, we have to notice. We have to notice, and we have to pay attention, and we have to grow from it.
Yeah. Well, it's not only the way forward. I would say that was the original plan.
Yes.
That was the original plan.
Right. But by way forward, I mean, I believe it works.
It works. Yes.
I believe it works.
Yeah.
It can work. It can work. We don't have to go backwards. We don't have to try to fight time and go in that direction.
It's futile.
Right.
And that's why we're so optimistic.
Right.
Like the harder the work we do, and the more we stay in it, the more excited we are about what it's giving, because we're seeing slow, quiet change begin to happen in people's lives.
Yeah.
And the ripple effect it has in their family and in their communities, and then also amongst shluchim and shluchos.
Yeah. That's also the ground for optimism or hope. At the end of the day, people live their lives. People have things that are dear to them, right? Besides abstract ideas, they have a spouse, they have children, they have parents, they have family, they have people that they know in their community. People have things that they care about. They need to make a living, and that forces you at some point to get real, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Your ideas and your Chanie doesn't pay the bills. It doesn't convince your wife. It doesn't make your kids love you. None of it. Right. So you have to get real. The question is, does getting real mean that you have to discard all that narrative that you were given because it doesn't apply? That's, I think, what you're seeing a lot of people feeling like, okay, I have to get real. I have to grow up. Growing up means forget about the stupid Mesivta upbringings, stupid Zalfa upbringings, and throwing potato salad at each other. That's ridiculous. I'm done with it. Out. Right. And so by way forward, it's like, no, you have, yes, the silliness has to go, right? But the beauty of it and the childishness and the immaturity of it has to go, and it could improve, it should improve, but the beauty of it can endure. You can take it with you, and bring it along on the journey.
Yeah, and that's your calling. That's your mission.
That's each person's calling.
Absolutely, each person's calling. Each chassid's calling. That's what you're here for.
Right.
And nobody can do it for you.
Right. In some way, what you're saying is the first thing you need to notice is yourself.
Hi, I'm doing that. Yes.
Because but that's the only thing
No, but your Peretz, it sounds simple and perfect, but it's
no, it's not.
It's everything.
It's everything. That's why I'm
Exactly.
getting so excited.
Yeah.
Because it's the only thing that you notice that you actually can notice.
Right.
Everything else
that you can notice and you can affect change and
can
growth.
affect change and growth. Yeah, but the only thing that you can notice entirety.
Right.
Instead, you could distract yourself by noticing other people.
Right.
And you can even make it holy by
And
bringing
holy
them
and judgmental.
challah and
Yeah.
All right. We could start a whole conversation from this. All right. It'll be for round 2, God willing. Next time in Boston.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If not in Yerushalayim.
Yes, L'chaim. Thank you for this wonderful Fabring.
Yes, you listen well, and you articulate what you're hearing in your own words, and it's.
Thank you.
Thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you.
Yeah.
My wife doesn't agree, but
You should have her on a podcast.
First your father, then your wife.
all right. Thank you.
All right.
The music for this podcast comes from the album Repentant Doors by Oren Tzor and Nadav Bachar and is used with their permission.